Okay.
Let's turn on the microphone.
They're good.
They're all on.
Okay.
Sorry.
I will call the meeting to order for Lowell Light and Power, our regular board meeting of May 10th, 2022. Roll call
Chair Beecham,
here.
Vice Chair Schrauben,
Here.
Board Member Cadwalder,
Here.
Board Member Fonger,
Here.
Board Member Crawford.
Here.
I will look for approval of the agenda.
No changes.
No changes.
Motion to approve. Supported.
It's been moved and supported. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Approval of the minutes from April 12th, 2022.
I move to approve the minutes from April 12th, 2022.
Okay?
Supported.
It's been moved and supported. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Public comment. Currently, there's no public here. They're all sitting at this table, either board members, employees, liaisons, all related to Lowell Light and Power. So we'll move on to action items.
All right, first is the annual Chamber of Commerce benevolence request. Liz reached out and supplied a letter contained in your board packet. It's pretty similar to what we do every year. A couple things I do like to highlight is the banner work that we do goes to support a lot of local organizations, like the food fight banners that are up now is a From event. So that goodwill is really spread amongst quite a few organizations in the community. The high school graduate banners up across the street. So it's something that we like to do. Ryan's able to work it into the schedule fairly easily, and with the request kind of being scattered across the year, it doesn't necessarily impact our ability to maintain a consistent workload, or it doesn't create any hardships from a labor standpoint. So it does. All benevolence requests require board approval. But with this request, we do recommend continuing to support the Chamber and their efforts in the next fiscal year.
Absolutely.
And I believe Liz was planning on being here today. I think she's got some other items that she'd like to bring to the board for consideration, but I think we'll push that off till next month. She's got a Riverwalk meeting tonight, so that's kind of their bread and butter, and she should probably be there, and she can be, she said that she is available next month since we moved the board meeting to the Thursday, so we'll plan on her being here next month potentially.
Wait a minute, next month our board meeting is on Thursday instead of Tuesday?
Yes.
Yes, board meeting is.
Because there's a conflict with the national.
The APPA National Conference.
I saw that.
Yeah, it's on
Sorry.
June 9th, which is the Thursday before, via
That rings a bell, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I have COVID brain sometimes, man.
With that, like I said, I've included a copy of the benevolence policy for review, but again, this is something that we have a long-standing tradition of doing.
So I would, any further discussion? I would entertain a motion to approve the Chamber of Commerce benevolence request for the year 23.
I would like to motion to approve the Chamber of Commerce.
Yes.
We're so moved.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm pretty tired, I guess. I didn't realize that. Sorry.
And,
Yeah.
and support? And support?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
All right, moving on to the next. Again, this topic was discussed quite a bit last month, but as we discussed last month, we've been evaluating purchase a new bucket truck to replace. I guess technically it replaces the green old bucket truck, but the plan will be to take and sell off the green old bucket truck that hides in the corner, take our current big bucket truck, move it to a spare, and then have the new truck as the go-to bucket truck. But as we discussed last month, we are faced with a number of challenges when it comes to replacing equipment, whether it's availability or price uncertainty, and the bucket truck's no different. So the way we approach this is Ryan and the guys kind of evaluated what the truck needs were, what our current capabilities are, and identified a Altec bucket truck on an international chassis with a Cummins diesel engine as what's best suited for our needs. Reached out to the Altec dealer and had him quote this through the My Deals program, which is a state pre-bid program. Basically, it guarantees essentially the most cost competitive or the most price competitive pricing that we can get because it's pre-bid out. So it kind of leverages a bigger pool because it's the price for all, I guess, trucks that meet this specification through the My Deals program. But some of the challenges we're facing with this one is the anticipated delivery date is not till fourth quarter of 2025, and I think realistically it will be first or second quarter of 2026 before it actually comes in. But we are planning we've adjusted the equipment replacement fund and contributions to reflect payment in fiscal year 26. Included a bunch of pictures and drawings and quite a bit of information in your board packet for review. But as we discussed last month, we're not exactly comfortable with the circumstances of knowing that there's going to be a chassis adjustment when International actually announces the chassis price for that year model. But it's kind of future plans. But we have the need. We really need to replace this truck, and I do not anticipate a better option coming available between now and when this truck does come available. But Ryan was very strategic in how he spec'd out this truck, and if a better option does come between now and then, with this truck being a very standard base model truck, it should be easy to redirect the sale to another utility. But be happy to answer any questions. Ryan would be able to answer questions about the truck itself far better than I could. But that's kind of the lay of the land right now. But it is our recommendation to authorize the purchase of the Altec Model AA55E included in the quote for the $230,475, subject to the price adjustments noted in the quote.
And everything that I read sounds great and everything. The only question that I have is, have they indicated, Altec or whatever, at some point going to an all-electric vehicle? I mean, and I'm just, like our small truck is, is a hybrid now and, and all that kind of stuff. And again, all of a sudden you just watching the TV and seeing all the electric vehicle commercials that are just left and right, and all of a sudden, so this is, 3 years from now, have they any indication that they're at some point going to be going to all electric or?
Right now, that size chassis, I don't think there's anything in the works.
Right.
I'm sure they're thinking about it, designing it, but it's going to be available at that time. There isn't going to be anything. Maybe there'll be stuff on the market 3 years from now or 4 years from now that could possibly be available. But
no, I'm just
there's nothing.
Curiosity more than anything.
Nobody trying to push anything that direction. I mean, there's hybrid buckets out there, but from the people we've talked to about the hybrid ones, where it's similar to the service truck, they don't really have that good of luck with them right now. Really,
they're too new.
Just too new, and they just had so many problems. They had to send it back in a bunch, a lot of maintenance. I don't think we want to go that route with the big truck just yet.
Yeah, we ran into some early technology challenges with the service truck.
Right.
It took some time to work out the bugs. They had to reprogram quite a bit, but I think the majority, we pay very close attention to the electric vehicle market. The vast majority of the interest has been in passenger vehicles so far. Tesla has done, put a lot into some larger trucks. I think that I think we'll see them in time. It's just a matter, but the use of the technology is so different that, I think we would have to get over we would have to really discuss and get comfortable with the new challenges that came with it, and not having an engine where the service truck, the boom operates off of it. So that hybrid approach, I think, would potentially work, but to go to an all-electric, I think we're still probably, like you said, 4 to 5 years from seeing something, and then another couple generations of developments to see it reach kind of the level that you see passenger vehicles right now. But that's my
Take on it.
That's my personal take on it. That's no insider knowledge. I wish I knew.
Does anybody else have any questions? If not,
Yeah, but just out of curiosity, are there other, how many trucks are like this? Are these easy to find, or are there basically, you have like your choice of 3 different types, and you can pick this one, or?
You're talking brands, like
Just-
brands of the boom or brands of the chassis, or?
The overall configuration, because I assume you can kind of combine different.
Yeah, there's other manufacturers out there. They had a little bit longer lead time and didn't have exactly the same features, and they were, I think their chassis price was just the same as this one, and I think the lead time was a little bit lengthier through the Terex version, and I don't know, we just all the different. I've used a lot of different trucks over the years, and we just don't have a lot good to say about Terex. And it's not a Ford Chevy thing. It's Terex just doesn't really hold up to the Alltech version. They have the hydraulic market figured out when it comes to aerial hydraulics. They do really good, and they have really good stuff.
With this truck, with any of the manufacturers, because they're a specialty item, you can customize them from the ground up, and you can do whatever. So when you talk about different models, it's an infinite combination. I mean, there's some utilities near us that pay extra to have the chassis painted and the whole unit painted their utility colors. I mean, consumers, every one of their trucks is a custom order. So what Ryan did and what we spec'd out here was kind of their base model. So every manufacturer has a couple base models, and then that's your starting platform, and you can adjust as needed there. Pretty much across the board, this is a stock. They're kind of base model, and then Ryan and the guys will modify it and make it, adjust it to our specific needs. But most of your customizations are, hey, we need a bigger cab. We want to do, it's functionality specific or design, color, aesthetic specifically to a utility. And then, pretty much anytime you add anything custom to them, it jacks the price up and it changes your place in line in the manufacturing process. So I guess there's 2 answers to the question, and neither of them are quite simple. But
So I guess it sounds like, though, it's ultimately kind of an easy choice, right? Once you kind of figured out, here's the things I want to put on it, you kind of knew from the beginning what we were looking for, like size-wise and boom-wise.
Yep, this is just, there's nothing extra or custom that we've asked. This is the basic model truck that, like the next one behind it in the manufacturing process, if it was just, it'd be the same as this one. There's nothing special about it. It's just like a car coming off the assembly line. It's just that. Yeah, just basic.
So you feel like you're getting everything you need?
Oh, yeah.
You're not compromising anything in any way?
And this truck will do just as good as the one that we have now that's our main truck, and really we don't need anything better than that. We don't need a custom paint job. We don't need tandem axle. What we have works really good for what we do around here. Works great.
yeah, we're fortunate that we can. A base model meets exactly what we're looking for. It's not like we're having to say we'd love to have this. I mean, there's things that they will modify on it, I'm sure, but our guys have pretty awesome fabrication skills. So anything that is lacking, I think these guys will be able to modify it themselves, and by the time it's all said and done, you won't be able to tell the difference between installed at the manufacturer versus what Ryan and his crews do to modify it.
I
Okay.
trust what Ryan feels that we should go in the right direction, is that truck.
So that's a motion?
That's a motion, but I do have a question. Is the other truck gonna break down between now and then? And
Good.
should we buy an extra one on the way?
We got some real adjustment to budgets and planning, if we're gonna buy an extra $230,000.
No, not an extra $230,000 one.
The other
David
truck-
Jr. But,
I'll take that as a
but
compliment.
but I'm thinking like a used one. Should we get another used one, or just in case this breaks down?
We know what happened to the truck that we have. If you go to get a used one, you don't know what someone else did to that thing. We completely went through the truck that we have now 2 or 3 years ago and cut out every piece of rust that was on there and welded new metal back in. This thing's like brand new structurally, and we'll know tomorrow if it's mechanically sound, because the mechanic's going to be there to do its annual boom test and inspection. So I don't see it having any issues. It's in really, really good shape. I mean, someday it may need new hoses in the boom, which is quite a
Right.
process, but that's not something where you need to scrap the truck for. It may need some engine work to get the oil leaks fixed, basically, because we don't really like parking it anywhere where you almost have to put cardboard under it everywhere you park it, or it's going to make a mess.
I've had
just
one of
'cause
those vehicles myself.
it's just that age of a truck, and it's just
Okay.
what they do, and it's not the end of the world. It doesn't pour oil out like crazy, like
No.
a quart spills when you're parked, but it leaks. But that'd be the only stuff that we have to worry about. Overall, the truck is in really, really good shape. It's like brand new. We just commented about it again today, how the guys love the truck. It works really good. It's in really, like I say, it's in really good shape. I'll say it again. And there is zero rust on it because we took care of it all.
So we've got one really good daily driver and one really good standby
Yep.
between now and the
Okay.
time.
I just want to
we
make
get-
sure that we're not shortchanging
No,
ourselves.
and it is,
definitely
the catch-22 with that is the used market, because the new market is, 2026.
Yeah.
The used market is through the roof, so if we were to buy one to bridge, we run the risk of having it, paying an increased price now, and then by the time we go to sell it off, because we don't need it anymore, the market goes down, we could potentially take a substantial loss on it. But they take really good care of the equipment, and I've asked the same question,
Of course they, I know
is
they
this
do,
thing
but-
gonna last till the new one comes?
Well, is
And-
Ryan gonna be here when we get it? That's my,
Close.
so.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Okay.
my question, I told them they extend the lead time out a little bit longer, so I
Thank
can
you.
stick around and make sure that DCs that come get delivered.
And if something happens with the trucks that we have now, I feel like there's other municipals out there that have the old green truck like we have tucked away in the back that they don't use very often, that they would surely let us borrow if we were in a bind, or something majorly failed, and hey, we need a truck, and I'm sure if you send an email out or reach somebody, you probably have something in an hour or less. It's just, that's how it would work. We'd loan our truck out if somebody asked us.
Right.
I mean, it's worthy of it, it's
Absolutely.
ready to go, and
Well, thank you.
Okay, so I have a motion from Tina. I need support.
I'll support.
Okay, it's been moved and supported for the new bucket truck purchase authorization. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
So I've got the UFS letter of engagement. Again, this is, I outlined in my memo that, this does fall within my spending authority for budgeted items, but I think it's important to go ahead and include the board in the initial discussion, make sure, from the start of the process through the end of the process, the board's involved. This is a major strategic initiative. But again, it's the update to our cost of service study. Along with that comes long-range updates to the long-range financial projections, and then it also develops a 5-year rate plan. The one caveat with this year is when we talked with UFS, they proposed having the board consider an alternative option to the rate design. The way that it's been done in the past is they've done a cost of service, and they actually they create a 5-year rate path, but only actually design rates for 1 year. And then every subsequent year, we re-engage UFS for very minor, well, you saw the costing here, it's about $2,000 a year to design the next year's rates. And one of the considerations is they have included, the base price of $20,000, and that includes the first year's rate design with a 5-year rate path. They'll still give a 5-year rate recommendation, but we could also go ahead and have them design years 2 and 3 rates. I wouldn't recommend going beyond 3 years. And at that point, we would have a 3-year board-approved rate path that would turn into one single board action, and it would establish a rate transparency for 3 years. That's kind of the upside of that. The downside of that is it does inhibit our ability to make adjustments if things like a pandemic happen in the middle of that 3-year period. I mean, we could always revisit if there was something, but there's always trade-offs. You increase transparency and increase a concrete knowledge of where you're going, but you lose a little bit of the control. That's why I wouldn't recommend going beyond 3 years. The first 3 years of a rate plan, you have far more confidence that your assumptions will come to fruition. Years 4 and 5 are typically where you need to revisit, but with the last 5-year rate plan, we implemented 5 years of rates based on the initial recommendation. So it doesn't necessarily change a whole lot. It's just, how would the board prefer to approach? Do we want to retain that flexibility in years 2 and 3, or do we want to provide a little more rate clarity or transparency of a multi-year plan to our customers?
So last time that we had this 5-year, and I don't know if you can tell us, so my question would be, what was the cost of that last 5-year plan? And should I ask these things, or should I give you the heads up beforehand? Because I'm just thinking of it now. But the last one that we did, didn't we do it year by year? I mean, every year we approved.
Yes.
We didn't do a 3-year plan. Every year, because what I remember is our cost of service. There were different categories that were basically underwriting the cost of service for everybody, and we said that's not right, and we're changing it, and some of the board members said, let's just rip the Band-Aid off and do the whole thing right now and get it, whereas Mark suggested that we stick to each year. We had it was a yearly plan each year.
And
so I guess what's the
there's two components there. So one of the big motivations last time was aligning and eliminating the cross-class subsidization, and that's where we found that the customer charge was significantly under the cost of service. So his recommendation was to take a 5-year approach to chipping away at correcting that. But that was one topic that was addressed. The other topic was it needs to increase revenue. So true additional revenue coming, because typically you've got neutral rate changes or you have rate increases, and you can adjust. You have one strategy of if you're just adjusting your cost of service or your customer charge, you ultimately increase the customer charge, but you back off an equivalent on the kilowatt hour charge. And if you look back, there's quite a bit of that. Hey, we increased by $2, and that would have resulted in more revenue than we originally wanted, so we backed off the energy piece. So what they provided us was a 5-year plan a 5-year recommendation to get our customer charge in alignment with the cost of service study. They also provided a recommendation to have a net revenue increase of 2.45%, I believe, annually. So that's the other piece of it. We shouldn't have as much movement that's necessary at the customer charge, but there will be two different discussions, one about the customer charge, one about a need to increase revenues to keep pace with inflation. So with that, we did come back annually, but they could have at that time even designed 3 years worth of rates at a time that accomplished the two goals of bringing the customer charge in alignment with the cost of service and providing enough additional revenue to keep pace with inflation.
So so this study is a little bit different than the study we had before by them. It's not, I mean, I just want to make sure.
It's the same study, but I think the outcomes will be different because the last study was the launching point for bringing alignment between the customer charge and the cost of service, where we've made a lot of movement on the residential side. We're still way under cost of service at the industrial classes, but it's less of a need. It's really about the residential and commercial. So since we've made the movement that we've made, I would expect a very similar recommendation of annual rate increases to keep up with inflation, but there will be changes to that cost of service or the customer charge, and the board will have decisions on, do we want to do one jump for the customer charge and then let it ride for the next 4 years, or depending on how big that gap is. But I still would anticipate a 5-year rate plan that targets an annual rate increase that results in additional revenue to keep up with the increased costs of labor and everything else. So it really comes down to, it's really more the rate design is about ensuring the revenue is there, and I think we have a little more flexibility if the board wants to. It really comes down to, do you want to give rate transparency for multiple years at the expense of flexibility, or do we want to retain flexibility and reanalyze and review rates on an annual basis? Because I think there's a benefit to the public on that side of not having a 3-year rate plan, and that means every year we have to reevaluate and make sure we're putting our eyes on it instead of saying we approved these last year, let's just implement them and go.
So are we going to be paying them still $20,000 a year, even if we plan 3 years out?
It's not $20,000 a year.
Okay.
The cost of service study is only done every 5 years.
Okay.
So that's, the first piece is 5 years of cost of service and one actual rate design.
Okay.
And then each additional rate. So if hypothetically we have $28,000 over the next 5 years, whether we carve it up $20,000 this year and then $2,000 for the next, at the end of that 5 years, we'll be back having this conversation.
Gotcha.
And we'll have that one lump sum that's really the meat and potatoes, the heavy
We're not
lift.
spending any
No.
less on this service, it's just how we are
There might be a slight price break by the two. I mean, I think last year was, we have got a lot of random stuff. I think it was like $2,100 last year. So it's a nominal savings and not of materiality to the decision from a savings. It's really a philosophical discussion about, where does the board how does the board want to approach this?
Well, I mean, I always think it's best to be in a position to be as nimble as possible, especially with the volatility of the market right now.
And I think that would, I think we'll know a lot more about the market by the end of the year. But the big thing too is the market, the power supply will influence a lot, but typically won't influence rate design because we have the PCA that will follow behind it and it will keep pace. So it's really about changes outside of the power supply, but there's still tremendous volatility, and I'm still waiting on insurance rates to go through the roof as a fallout from COVID. Waiting on, we're still seeing crazy pricing. I saw stick PVC in the warehouse today and told Ryan to put it back on eBay and see if we can't sell it for about 4 times what we paid for it. But we need it, so we're not going to do that. But you know, we are seeing quite a bit of volatility in other areas.
Right.
So, as a ratepayer, I would still like to see you guys do it annually just to keep a pulse on it so that it doesn't get carried away, even if you looked at a 3-year, if it's not a huge cost, at least keep a pulse on it.
And that's
so I know
it,
exactly
yeah.
what's going on.
And that's the you got trade-offs either which way. You know, the customers may have clarity as to what the rates are going to do in 2 or 3 years, but with that comes a little more separation between staff and the board and the rates, because it would be a single board action that would set the rates for 3 years or multiple years instead of an annual review where we ask UFS to take a look at it on an annual basis.
So, one last couple of questions, or not necessarily questions, but points. So you're looking, so I know that you, and I'm glad you do bring it to the board, but this is within your purview of spending. So bringing it to the board, this company, Mark lives in Holland.
Yes,
I mean,
he worked for Holland for a long time.
So, but anyway, so I mean, we've used them before. They're a reputable firm. They're recognized by the APPA, American Public Power Association. The only question that I ever have when we're doing something like this would be, is there other companies out there that do this, and without, why would you, what's your reasoning to go with this company and not getting a comparative bid?
Yeah, I think that's fair, and really the biggest answer is UFS is the nationwide leader in developing municipal rates. I've learned quite a bit coming here. Some of the stuff that I was seeing in TVA, which is a $20 billion a year company, they lean on Mark. They call Mark, and they have people making more than the combined salary at this table, trying to figure some of this stuff out, and they still rely on. That was, you know, that's not why we do it, but it's evidence of the industry leading status, and to be able to leverage an industry leader that's in our backyard, it really would come down to why would we use somebody else, and the motivations there. The only thing that anybody else could compete on is price. And I don't think price is, when it comes to professional service, don't go with low bid. $20,000 or $28,000 over 5 years is not the place to cheap out over. So really,
I agree.
No.
I just want the public to have an understanding.
absolutely.
And if the board's not asking these questions, then I think we're not doing our job.
No, and I think it's fair, and I actually am a firm believer that we need to be able to justify why we use anybody. And UFS is quite possibly the easiest outside party to justify using, because they are relatively local. They know our system. I mean, and accessibility. When I called Mark to say, hey, I'd like to review this PCA. Well, here's a proposal. If it's good, let's go. And we're immediately on the call. I can call Mark. Or Mike, who is very much hand-in-hand involved in everything, and they're accessible. I do know other firms, and I personally know people at other firms that do this type of work nationwide, and they just don't stack up to UFS, to be quite frank.
So what were you going to recommend to?
Hearing the feedback from the board, I think it would be best to review annually and go ahead and do the $20,000, have them do the full, and with that will come a 5-year rate plan. It just won't be actionable rates. It'll be a guideline to say, you know, the recommendation is to increase revenue by 2.45% or whatever it is, annually, and then on an annual basis, we'll carve those pieces up to exactly how do we get that 2.45%. And I think, like I said, I spoke with Daniel last week about it. We talked a little bit, and I think the annual review and retaining that flexibility and nimbleness is more beneficial than providing transparency 3 years out, because they're still very transparent. It's not saying that if we don't do a 3-year plan, we're not being transparent. It's just acknowledging that we cannot firmly commit to rates 2-3 years down the road. So my recommendation at this point would be to approve the project with a 1-year rate design.
So I guess just to clarify, how would it look in 3-year things? So every 3 years we'd have a new 3-year plan?
What we would do then is, it would still be part of the 5-year plan, and after 3 years, we would regroup. So in one board action, you would approve 2020, calendar year 2023 rates, 24 rates, and 25 rates. And when we came around to 26, we'd re-engage UFS and say, where are we at? Have things materialized the way we think? Do we need to reevaluate? And at that point, we would either come up with a 2-year plan to round out the 5 years, or we would take years 4 and 5 as a 1-year piece plan, and then we'd get back to reviewing the cost of service at year 5, or at the end of year 5.
Okay. So yeah, I guess my opinion is that I don't think that 3-year makes that much sense. At the end of 3 years, you're doing 2 1-year plans.
Yeah, it really.
You kind of lose. You feel like so we're transparent for 3 years and then not for 2.
Yeah, and you
Or
could
is it
do.
different? I mean,
Yeah, it's just different. You could do 2 years, and different utilities take different approaches. I've been a part of 5-year rate plans where the board made one rate action for 5 years. It was to fund, known major funding, and it's been well received. I've also been a part of annual rate increases that are well received or not well received. I mean, I don't think, to be honest, where it's mostly used is when you have major financial needs, and it's better to provide that transparency on the front end, because there's going to be significant rate impacts. I don't anticipate that with
So you're
this cost
trying
of
to-
study.
So you're trying to compensate for like an increase with some more cost certainty and say, well, look, we're gonna have to increase rates to account for this new plant we're building or something.
Yeah.
But at least you're certain that you're gonna be paying this much for 5 years.
But it was something that I think UFS is seeing more of a trend, so they wanted to explore it. And I told Mark that we'd have the discussion at the board table, and this is why it's in my spending authority. But I wouldn't want to say, hey, we went with a 1-year plan, and you guys come back and go, well, why are we just doing this once a year? Could we do something else? So I didn't. There are some benefits, but I don't think the benefits outweigh what you have to give up by doing it.
So let me,
then, I guess one more follow-on question then. So if we wanted to change rates after 2 years, could we?
Yeah. The board this board has ultimate rate setting authority. All we have to do is put it on public record for 30 days and make it publicly available for 30 days, and it's effective per city charter. So the board always has that. So we don't technically lose that flexibility, but I would be concerned with, for one, the circumstances that would dictate needing to do that, and then just the public perception of rolling back something.
Right.
Because ultimately board action is essentially a promise at that point. And to roll that back, it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Okay, but at least there's that general 5-year outlook.
Yes.
So
Right.
that's Providing that's the transparency part, really. It's just the certainty part of approving all of it at once.
Yeah.
which I'm assuming it's kind of similar to what we did before, is we had this 5-year, we basically have this 5-year plan, but we're implementing it
1 year at a time.
1 year at a time. And so we have an initial cost of $20,000, then each additional year is $2,000. So we do the first year, and here's our 5-year plan. We do the first year, and then Mark's going to come back and say, okay, year 2, this is what's gone on. It's a little bit different than what we anticipated. Here's to get to that 5-year.
It typically is gonna, I mean, it would have to be something very substantial to deviate from a 5-year rate plan.
Okay.
Because the long-range financial projections will look at, some pretty known industry standards in terms of assumptions. I mean, all projections are based on assumptions. So, they're pretty confident assumptions. So if something major would have to change that would say, hey, we need more ultimate revenue, because it's ultimately about how much additional growth revenue. So if one thing would be, if we had a massive new development come in and we are cut, there's 200 home or 2,000 homes going in and they're going up quick or something, that could impact our revenues to the point where we may say, hey, we need to adjust our revenue needs because our expenses aren't outpacing our revenues at this point because revenues aren't what we thought. But it would take one of those substantial deviations to really warrant that.
Just gives us objective evidence to be able to make those decisions should they happen.
Yeah.
And do you anticipate, I mean, this study will tell you, do you anticipate our cost of service having to change very much? I mean, because I get, well.
Very much isn't.
Well, I mean, so my point being is, we as a board, 5 years ago, looked at it and said, here's where you need to go. Mark basically came back, here's where you need to go over 5 years to get back to where your cost of service is appropriate, that. So my point, and some of the board said, you know what, let's just rip the Band-Aid off right now and jump to that so that we're there. Because what we were doing is, year 2, we still weren't at the cost of service. Year 3, we still weren't at we were getting closer, but we still weren't. The intention was, by the time we get to year 5, we will be caught up to be at what the cost of service is and what we're actually charging.
Two caveats, I guess.
Okay?
So the cost of service was identified at the beginning. The plan over 5 years was to get the cost of service where it needed to be in year 1. So you have 5 years worth of changes plus a 6th year now. The cost of service I would anticipate to continue to increase, and just for a simple fact of the cost for us to own and maintain our electric system will increase. Our expenses are increasing, cost of labor is increasing, cost of goods it costs more, reliability costs more, and it's really what a lot of utilities call their customer charge a ready-to-serve charge, and a lot of it pays for the reliability of the system, and the cost to be reliable, it has gone up. So very much, I've learned over the last 3 months, there is zero price certainty in anything. So I shouldn't get out my crystal ball, but I can say the long-range projection, aside from a pandemic and crazy stuff, would be for a glide path, for it to continue to increase, but keep pace with our increases in costs. It's not a revenue generator, it's just an offset to our cost to maintain our system. So it will, I would anticipate it increasing, but I also want to say it's not a 1-year increase, it's actually a 5 to 6 year increase, because our goal over 5 years was to get our cost of service to be originally identified, and you have to have all that empirical data to develop that. So that data was a year, the previous year at that point.
Based on that 5 years, do you feel they delivered the goods? Did they not properly adjust for the inflation and the cost? They did a pretty good job of saying where they were 5 years ago to the end of the plan? Were they? I'm hoping they were pretty close.
Their goal isn't necessarily to try and project what your cost of service is going to be. It's to identify, but as far as needs for, you got the customer charge piece and the cost of service, and then the revenue requirement side. I think they've done a good job of keeping pace with the need. I mean, obviously, 5 years ago, nobody predicted a pandemic. So, but aside from you know, I'm sure somebody, actually, I'm sure somebody predicted a pandemic. But Daniel, dang it, Daniel.
Notre Dame
Why weren't you on the
500
board at
years
that
ago.
point? Yeah. But, you know, yeah, I would say they have enough insight into the industry and have enough history that their assumptions are based, they're assumptions and guess, but they're based in the best information that they have available to them.
And I go a lot by Peter Hefner, even though, you know, he does our auditing. And auditing is really just to make sure we're doing things correctly and all that kind of stuff, and that somebody's not, you know, walking off with money and everything else. So that, but at the same time, we also get information from him because he does a lot of other utilities in Michigan, and he's always, you know, giving us, you know, here's where, you know, you're way ahead of the curve compared to XYZ and this and everything. So I take a lot of that in, you know, it's not necessarily gospel, but it take a lot of his input of how Lowell Light and Power is doing, because he's auditing the books of many power companies. And so,
And I think that's a good analogy because UFS does, I mean, I was on a call recently and another utility, I'm calling up Mark. I mean, he does pretty much, I don't know how much of the work he does in Michigan, but he does the vast majority of the rate development work in Michigan, and, you know, is very involved with quite a few of the very prominent utilities that we hold in high regard for their ability to operate at a very high level.
okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to,
Motion to accept the cost of service study with a 1-year rate plan and then revisit it annually.
okay,
I'll support.
it's been moved, supported. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
All right, budget time. So every year, between the draft budget and the revised budget, we spend a bunch of time looking at everything. Megan and I have been meeting weekly for the past month.
Long time.
And yes, feels like even longer for her. I'm sure she has to deal with me. But no, we meet regularly. We have regular discussions. There were not a ton of changes between the draft budget and the final budget. Some of the major changes behind the scenes that don't necessarily reflect in all the numbers is we've seen, and we'll get into it, don't want to get into it too much, but later on we'll shed some light into it. The volatility in the energy market has erupted over the last month. They're talking about natural gas is now trading at over $8 an MMBTU. This time last year it was, what, Casey, $3? So that drives quite a bit of the energy market. We have seen, Meg and I have looked at least 3 additional models presented by MPPA of hypothetical situations. We have taken the most conservative approach out of all 4 to try and address the volatility. So while the numbers don't necessarily reflect monumental changes, it does reflect fewer kilowatt hour sales. We are curbing our projections on growth over the next year based on some of the volatility, the increases in the interest rate market. So we have scaled back our kilowatt hour sales, but the volatility in the power supply market has driven actually increases in revenue, but that's purely to offset power cost expenses. I think we ultimately reduced our expectation of sales by the growth down from about 2.5% to 2%, which is pretty big jump, but we did increase anticipated revenues from the PCA, but we're still conservative on that approach. Again, we've added some expenses to the purchase power, and then the only other line item that I'll highlight is there's been some, I guess, questions about deficient energy charges and surplus energy charges, and ultimately those two line items hit the same GL account, but we've always broke them out separate, and as the market increases in volatility, trying to peg each individual component gets more and more challenging, and it doesn't, ultimately it's the net difference between surplus and deficiency that's what we pay. Now that's our market balancing, but to try and unbundle the components of market balancing are just, it's really, we don't have enough data, and it really would get down to needing to analyze hourly data or ask MPPA to analyze hourly data and then project our load data down to the hourly point for a year, and it's just not, it's not going to happen. So we simplified that. Again, there's some additional costs that we incorporated. We'll make a couple notes on the capital budget. We did update the capital budget, the equipment replacement fund to reflect changes in supply chain, mainly the bucket truck. We have increased the capital equipment budget by some just to accommodate the need. The project across the river, we're anticipating working with some other municipalities to bid out materials for not this upcoming fiscal year's project, but the following fiscal year. So the underground component here, just the underground cable to get us under the river, under the Grand River at Jackson Street, has increased $60,000. That whole project was only scheduled to be a $600,000 project. So the whole project has increased by 10% from one material item. We think, we spoke with GRP, who does all of our engineering, and we think there's potentially an opportunity to purchase that underground cable for the following year at a discounted rate if we can coordinate with some other utilities. So we've increased the capital equipment budget in anticipation of and giving some budget flexibility to take advantage of some cost-saving opportunities that we're hoping materialize over the next year. We did make some slight adjustments to the facility improvement budget to reflect an updated, or a quote for the roof above our heads. One of the things that specifically we asked for board feedback on, and we did not ultimately end up incorporating into the budget because of the increased volatility that we've seen, is continued work on the engine room. And I want to preface that by saying, while it's not originally included in the budget, our budget's we took a very conservative approach to the budget this year, and the hope would be that we can reevaluate once some costs materialize and may free up some funds mid-year. But at that point, we'll have a clearer picture of what the impacts of this year are on our cash balances, and with the potential of taking a hit on our cash balance and dipping below our 120-day cash reserve policy. I think it would be at this point, I don't think we have enough information to include funds for the engine room. And I know it seems like a relatively small piece of the budget, but we're looking at 1.5 to 2 days of operating cash to put into that. And when you put it in days of operating cash, we may fall short at the audit time of that 120-day mark. We were at 123 plus days last year. A couple days can be the difference between having the cash reserves to adhere to our policy. And I don't want to manage just to a policy if it's not a good financial decision, but we have the cash reserve policy in place to deal with volatile times in the market. That's what we're dealing with right now. And we'll shed some additional light on that, but we're, again, I highlight in the memo that, we took a very conservative approach when we revised the budget, got very conservative on the power supply and the revenues, and also in our expenses. But we were able to maintain the increased funding to the pension plan, continuing to make substantial investments into the distribution grid, continuing to fund the equipment replacement fund so we can continue to phase out some of our outdated equipment. And then this budget still maintains about $85,000 in cash growth at the end of the budget. So we think that those 4 priorities have been captured, and we hope that we're able to grow additional cash based on a conservative approach. So without going through any line items, if there's any specific questions, be happy to answer them, but I kind of glossed over and provided some additional fairly minor details in terms of the overall budget.
So the question I have is that if we're taking a conservative approach, right, because we're basically saying the market's going to go up and down a lot more than usual, so we don't know where we're going to end up in this scale. Well, I guess at what point are we going to, how are we going to identify if the market actually trended down so that we're going to have a little more room now to actually do the equipment room as an example, just a hypothetical.
I think it would be more in projects. Does a project come in under budget? Was there a project that we were conservative in our approach, or do revenues outpace? Because ultimately, power supply will be captured in the PCA, but there's a major lag, and we'll show an example. We've got some 12-month projections that we're going to share with it. There is a lag in that, so it turns into it over the long haul. We will be kept whole through the market, but we do see a need to make sure we have those cash reserves available, and any commitment to a project now would just eat into those cash reserves, and then there'd be a lag, so we'd be less nimble. I like that word. I'm going to use it. Less nimble in the interim, but I think the reevaluation would be more just kind of a pause in we've got month-by-month projections, project by project. 6 months in, we can go back and say, is our cash position better than what we planned on? Do we have projects that, because this year, if you look, we had some unbudgeted, the dock addition has lingered this year, and we've got about $85,000 in that was unbudgeted, but we are also able to finish the substation project $50,000 under budget. So it'd be those changes that at that point we could come back to the board and say, here's the landscape right now. We finished the audit. The audit indicated that we're either in excess of the 120 days of operating cash or deficient of that. That would influence quite a bit. That's one of those things that we'd have more knowledge at that point. And it'd be more a reevaluation of the overall landscape of, is this where we want to take the necessary funds at this point? And, I think another thing will be costs. If we don't have an end plan for that room and steel prices are still through the roof, that's going to be a relatively, there's going to be a pretty good material cost in that area because the pit is so much bigger. Again, are there other costs that are going to come down in that volatility outside of necessarily our market, but general volatility? If that subsides some, we may get a little more confidence in the price that we're paying for it, and you combine that with some freed up funds or freed up comparison to projections, and all of a sudden I think we'll have a better idea of where do we stand. We'll have more clarity on the fiscal year at that point.
So would it be worthwhile to establish some sort of a benchmark and check every 3 months or something?
I would say that it probably wouldn't, I don't think 3 months would provide the clarity, and really we're going to do the work in the winter. So I think what would make sense is revisiting in early December, maybe the December board meeting, and then knowing that the work would probably take place in January or February when the crews are down, especially if we're going to do it, take on a piece of it in-house. The hope is we don't have the free time to do it between now and the middle of winter, honestly. And the way that the guys have been, full throttle for the last, I don't know, for a while, we got lucky and did the engine room work this year on a stretch of bad weather, but But my thought would be if we revisit in December, that would give us time and wouldn't change the project schedule. Because that's the other thing is, whether we approve it and include it in the budget, it's probably not going to show up on the docket until January, February timeframe anyways. You get a better, if we got to bring in contractors, you get better contracting price when you can give somebody an out of the elements job in January. Nobody else is really, you're not pouring a lot of concrete in the winter outside, so interior concrete, you get a little better price. So regardless, we're probably not taking the project on until the middle of next winter anyways.
Even just in general, if you say it's a conservative approach, that means normally we wouldn't be this conservative, so at what point, maybe this summer, do you reevaluate, can we start being a little less conservative now for the second half of the budget and start doing some of the things we had hoped to do?
Yeah,
or do we reevaluate and say, holy cow, it's even worse than we thought?
Yes, and that's what Megan and I do it informally on a monthly basis when she, when we pull together the income statement, we kind of evaluate where are we at to budget, what budget factors, and what's trending the way we thought it would, what's not, what's lagging, what's ahead. Transmission expenses were a good example this year where we regularly watched it because it was something that wasn't trending the way we hoped it would. So there's monthly, there's natural evaluations of how we stand to the budget, but really if we're going to sit and take a deep dive, it'd be a mid-year, and then at that point I'd want to bring back to the board what additional, all comes down to what additional funds have been freed up, and present the board with options on where to dedicate those additional funds.
When I was part of the board, we talked about cash available. Is that still based on 120 days availability, 180 days? What would that take us to if something happened? How many days would that be?
This
something
projected
different?
total cash available is the cash that we anticipate to generate, available cash generated through electric operations during the fiscal year. So it's a 1-year snapshot of saying, over the year, we anticipate generating this much available funds. So it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with our cash reserves.
Okay.
It's just what you basically, you take, your operating revenues, you back out your expenses, you add back depreciation because it's a non-cash expense, you add back your other non-cash operating expenses, and then back out the cash items that don't reflect in the income statement, and that $1,034,592 is what that remaining balance is that we anticipate to generate through this budget.
Okay.
So it's a forward cash availability, not a
Gotcha.
rear-looking cash availability.
So everybody knows what my feeling has been on the engine room and with, moving forward. So I've changed my thoughts a little bit currently, because, what I'm throwing this out to the rest of the board and to the administration, to put their thinking caps on and look at different scenarios or whatever. And I'm glad you're taking the conservative, because I'm nervous what the economy is doing and with our ratepayers, that their fuel for their autos is now up to $4.39 and continuing to go higher, and the inflation and the supply chain not being, you're looking at different things, baby formula, you can't get baby formula, and all these things are going. I have a concern that down the road, our ratepayers could struggle to pay their bills. It snowballs. And so my point being is, I rather look at, do we look at a bigger optimization program that we, instead of everybody getting 2 light bulbs, we provide them with, 20 or whatever it does to help our ratepayers reduce the amount of energy that they're using, and so therefore reducing their bills and that type of thing. So would I love to see the engine room done? Yes, I would. But my concern right now is our ratepayers, and in this times of, I feel, is uncertainty. You know, I see people, you know, using their credit cards more, putting things on credit to pay their bills. Now the interest rate has gone up. Now they, you know, and it just becomes a snowball effect. And so I want Light and Power to be a leader, to have the community and our ratepayers look to Lowell Light and Power to help them. And I think our office staff is gonna, you know, and hopefully I'm all wrong, but I think our office, we're gonna have a lot of people, I think, that are gonna struggle to pay their, I mean, I'm not just electric, but their grocery bills, their gas bills, their electric, I mean, it's just, I guess I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I think it's a concern. I see it as being a big concern right now.
But what can we do as a community to help educate them? I mean, some people are going to keep their thermostats at 68 and they're going to complain about their electric bill. How do we educate them that says, hey, you know, by going to 74, you save X off your bill? So there's some ways that we can entertain them and educate them that do that. Otherwise, I'm going to keep it at 68. And, you know, if I'm late on my bill, I'll get there eventually. But again,
And we'll provide some rate projections again later in the meeting, but we did recently revamp, Lisa, with the with the sunsetting of the EWR requirements or energy optimization. We implemented a new smart energy program. It's completely optional. It's a local control program, which is great. We do mirror quite a few of the old programs, but with that, we actually took on a strategic objective this year to revamp residential kits and refocus on low income ahead of this volatility, actually. So I'd love to say we're ahead of the curve a little bit, but we do, you know, it's a struggle to reach out and communicate with low income customers. We're trying to work with I've got some examples at the end of the board packet about some financial assistance information that we're sharing with customers. We signed up to participate in a Michigan financial aid program. Again, I think I highlighted it last month or 2 months ago. So we are very active in trying to get out ahead of it. I will also say that our EO budget, we typically don't spend what we have in the budget because it's tough to reach a lot of the people that are most in need don't have the free time to take help. And that's a struggle, is trying to help people who don't have time. They don't have time to receive the help because they're too busy trying to help themselves.
Yeah.
So it's a catch-22, but we are very active in redeveloping the lighting kit. We have a stockpile of lights, so we do have the ability to meet individual needs if we need to. So yeah, we have that flexibility, and I think that's a good approach. And on the heels of that, it's also one of the reasons we started looking at where rates are going. Making sure we have that freed up cash to it's not invested in the engine room at this point. I think Brian, highlighted last month that there's also perception issues on what are we spending our money on. I think so. I guess I just agree, and we are actively pursuing the things that you mentioned.
Okay, anything else with the budget? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this budget and forward it on to City Hall.
So motioned.
Support.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Benefits.
All right, so benefit renewal this year is a little bit more simplified because our life insurance, accidental death and dismemberment, short-term disability and long-term disability, we got a 24-month rate guarantee last year, so those items don't have a rate increase. Included in your packet is some, the first item is just some for your information type items. The IBW has announced that their increase for 2023 is only going to be 0.6%, which is,
That's pretty good.
I can't complain. I did not expect that, so that's just an informational item. We move on to our health plan for non-union employees. I'll start with line 2, item 2, which is the overall increase was 6.95%. Talking with BHS, this is very much in line with what they thought. It's, quite frankly, it's less than what we budgeted in the draft budget. We were anticipating at least a 10% increase across the board on dental and health. So all things considered, it's really a pretty small increase compared to what could have happened. I highlight some numbers in there in terms of the overall impacts and changes. The changes, there are very, very minimal changes to the actual benefits. And then from a cost standpoint, total premium increase is under $10,000. And you can see, there's fairly small impacts to the employee, and of that $9,819 increase, the employees collectively share the 10% of that, and we carry 90% of that. So the total budget impact is slightly less than the 10,000. So we did look at some other plans, and the other plans are contained in the BHS presentation in your packet, and without making significant adjustments to the benefits, there aren't really comparable cost-effective plans, and I would ask the board to not make significant changes to benefit levels right now. I think our benefits package is something that's very attractive for our employees, and as a tool for attracting and retaining high-quality employees, our benefits package is something that definitely separates us from some other opportunities our employees might be faced with or be presented with. So, as long as the board does want to retain the same level of benefits, it'd be staff's recommendation to approve the priority health renewal quote with a 6.95% increase. Moving on to dental, this one's a 2.21% increase, and when you look at the total dollars, it's a very nominal increase. And again,
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. No, go
When
ahead.
you're saying dental, so is this still everything for non-union, or is this across the board?
I'm sorry. Dental is the only thing that's separated union and non-union is the healthcare.
Okay.
Everything beyond that, so your life, AD&D, short-term disability, long-term disability, and dental are all the same insurance is company-wide.
Okay.
But with the dental, there's other options in there. Again, the Delta Dental, we highly recommend staying with Delta Dental because their network services the needs of our,
It's a huge
I've been told by someone that I trust a lot and who works in the industry that Delta Dental has a very, very good network, and that's where you're gonna,
You could be out of state
yeah.
and find a dentist.
Yeah, and we looked last year, and the local dentists are on here. It's the most expensive network that we found. So at a $236 a year increase, we recommend retaining Delta Dental. The one, and then in the board, I give you some overall, overall impacts across the board. ultimately brings the total benefits package to a 6.35% increase. Again, your numbers are split out here. The only other thing I will highlight here is something that's newly made available to us because we have Delta Dental. This is the first year Delta has offered a Delta Vision insurance. And the thing that, so what we're proposing for board consideration is a completely voluntary, 100% employee cost vision insurance through Delta Vision. And again, one of the benefits that we have with this being a voluntary is there's no minimum participation level to get the service. Most other vision insurance plans, you have to have X number of belly buttons on the plan. That's how I think that's usually the terms that they use, the insurance term.
Standard industry term.
Yeah, standard industry term. But this is an option that we're able to afford our employees because we have Delta Dental and because they're an employee of Light and Power, and at a very reasonable cost. It's something that we would encourage the board to consider, as it has no impact to the finances of the utility, but it could potentially be a great benefit to any employee that gets it. We would support offering this to our employee group. So,
I would love it.
with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but again, the recommendation is to ultimately to renew all insurances with the
Wait a
current
minute.
carriers.
On the vision, does the vision cover like any like LASIK surgery or does it Delta Vision?
I would
I
be.
didn't think I saw that.
I would say, I'll be honest, I did not look at the details of the benefits.
How
I
about
would.
hearing? Do we have hearing coverage?
What?
Dental, vision, and hearing.
Any hearing, we don't have a separate hearing, so any hearing insurance we would have would be through
So
Priority
we have
Health.
to be medically needed. Do you guys have hearing aid covered?
I can make a lot of jokes, but I'm not going to.
Okay.
I'll be honest, I don't have any answers on level of coverage for hearing.
It's
Nobody
rare to
needs
have that,
What?
Yeah.
hearing aid coverage. It's
Everybody
rare
has
to have
selective
that.
hearing aids.
Don't we already have that here with this plan?
We may have it, anything would be through the Priority Health, because Priority Health they have some minor.
Priority health is good.
And they have some minor vision
Okay.
built into it, but it's not comprehensive.
Right.
It's a 50% or something.
One visit or something
yeah.
crazy stuff.
The one question I have, not that
I
it
didn't.
makes any difference, but so all these benefits are basically the same whether they're union or non-union. Is the health portion of it pretty much similar for our non-union members and our union members? I know that
They're very different structures because we're a healthy by choice
Mhm.
with us, and theirs is more of just standard insurance plan. They're both.
So the union doesn't have the healthy by choice?
No.
Okay.
No, they're just a standard plan. To be honest, we don't know. I don't have a ton of information on it because it's all managed through the IBEW. We get emails that meet annual compliance requirements, and they announce rate increases. But that's really handled through the union hall. But they're both very comprehensive and quality insurance plans. And just for reference, I did, in addition to the alternative healthy by choice plans, we've worked with the city in evaluating the West Michigan Health Pool. And our current plan would be about a 20% rate increase to go with them. I think the city has a different outlook. I'll let them dig into it, but the unique characteristics of our employee group make our rates and benefits very competitive.
Okay, any other questions? If not, I would look to approve the recommendation from Lowell Power Management.
All motion. Say, apparently we're not having insurance next year for a second.
You didn't get a support yet.
It's been moved and supported, and I just say that because we're not making, because it's a 2-year thing with the union members, and they're not up for renewal on the health, and that's why the way I stated it was, instead of trying to explain all those things out, it's just what the management has recommended. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
All right, so this was a new one. This is a MPPA, this is the world's worst name, Power Supply Portfolio Risk Management Policy Update. It's a mouthful. But MPPA, at the end of 2021, the 15% renewable portfolio standard required under PA 342 expired. This was the same PA that said our EO or energy optimization requirements. So with the sunsetting, MPPA's updated their power supply portfolio risk management policy to reflect that sunsetting of the rule, and included in your packet is a full copy of the power supply risk management policy. I hope nobody read it in its entirety, but if you did, congratulations, it's a riveting reading. No, it's good. It is good. There's a lot of good information in there. But specifically under Section 5, under the Renewable Energy Management Services, MPPA basically states that their policy is to continue to follow the intent of PA 342. And the intent was to have utilities have 15% of their load come from renewable energy. In order to claim this and satisfy the requirements of the PA, MPPA retired renewable energy credits, or RECs, on our behalf. Lowell's generation mix has always produced sufficient RECs to satisfy the RPS standard, or the RPS. Now that everything is sunsetted, the plan is to continue to follow in those same footsteps, and continue to retire at 15%. And we, at a future date, I'd like to do a little bit of a board education session on what it means to claim to be renewable, because there's very specific federal guidelines and federal recommendations on what you have to do to claim a % renewable. And it ultimately comes down to, you have to retire the RECs to satisfy that. With our RECs that are generated through naturally generated through our power supply portfolio, we generate a little over 20% of our, the equivalent of about 20% of our load from renewable energy. The RECs do have a 5-year shelf life, and they range in, Daniel and I talked about this some, but they range in value based on when they were generated, but typically are worth about $2 a piece. A couple years ago, they were worth about $1.75 a piece. So they're relatively nominal in terms of the value at this point. So it is, I had some pretty lengthy conversations with MPPA about, what does this mean, and what are you actually asking us in terms of making a decision. And a lot of it is the retirement strategy. There were some utilities that didn't naturally generate enough renewable energy credits to satisfy PA 342, so MPPA had to go out and procure those, so they're buying RECs on the open market to retire on their behalf. That piece isn't really applicable to us. So really, it's about the retirement strategy. And right now, with everything in flux, with a whole lot of unknowns, and where the market's going to go, future legislation, the recommendation from MPPA, and recommendation that's been supported by the Risk Management Committee at MPPA and our peers, and also is supported by management here locally, is to just continue on the path that we've been on, continue to learn about the market, decide where the market's going to go, wait to see what legislation comes about. And the big thing right now is just monitoring stuff and making sure that our recs don't retire. And we continue to monitor that on an annual basis with MPPA, because that would be the only downfall at this point, is letting something with some sort of value expire without monetizing it or capturing the value elsewhere. So it would be my recommendation to follow the recommendation of MPPA staff in the Risk Management Committee and accept MPPA's Renewable Energy Management Services as they're detailed in the MPPA Power Supply Risk Management Policy, and then also to retain all of the previous selections that we've made on this document. They were reinforced last year with some changes, so I didn't really highlight any of the other topics, but nothing has changed that would warrant a shift in risk management strategies and other areas. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but that's the recommendation on the table.
The only question I have, so that in Public Act 342 sunset, so it's over with. And I believe, and at least what we were always told, was part of that was that renewable energy had to be created in Michigan. Now that that's sunset, no longer, can the renewable, do we need renewable credits? And if we do, can they come from wind from Iowa? Can they come from different places and count? Whereas before, it had to be generated in Michigan for it to count.
Yes, you've always had to retire MyRecs, which are Michigan recs. So while you can't retire recs generated outside of Michigan, in Michigan, to count towards much, what we actually do have, the other thing is we don't.
Explain what retire means.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll start back at the beginning. So
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. A rec is 1,000 kilowatt hours or 1 megawatt hour generated from a renewable source. At the time of generation, the environmental attributes and the energy attributes are decoupled, and there's a value placed on the environmental component, the energy coming from a renewable source. There's a value associated with that. There's also value associated with just the energy. So when a 1,000 kilowatt hours is generated from one of our solar plants that we participate in, so Assembly Solar 2 generates, our prorated portion of that generates 1,000 kilowatt hours, we receive one rec. That rec has a shelf life of 5 years, which retirement basically just means you are taking it off of the ledger book. You're taking it out of circulation, and it's an auditable trail to make sure multiple entities aren't claiming the same environmental attribute that came from the same 1,000 kilowatt hours. So retirement basically says when they're generated, we load them in, they're audited in a MyRecs account with the state of Michigan, and when we retire, we basically take that out of circulation. You kind of think about it as a dollar bill. You can pass that dollar bill around. That's not really a good analogy because multiple people can spend it. But ultimately, that dollar bill has a certain value. At some point, it's taken out of circulation. That's all REC is it taking it out of circulation so nobody else can claim it. So we actually, to meet our standard, we always would, like to meet our 2022 standard, or 2020 standard, we would retire RECs generated, so we're claiming the renewable attribute from kilowatt hours generated 3 and 4 and 5 years ago, because they have that 5-year shelf life. So right now, we still are sitting on vintage 2018 RECs, vintage 2019 RECs, so it's just, when they're generated, there's an ID tag basically put on them, and that commodity is kind of turned into a tradable or sellable or an actual value is attached to it.
Is there Rex now replacing that as we continue to get
Yes.
them every year?
Yeah, so we have, our natural portfolio generates about 22%. It's hard to tell, it's not exactly, if you look at like our precision report, it'll say approximately 23% of your power supply comes from renewable resources, but we actually, back to your original question of can we have them from elsewhere? For one, we don't want to buy RECs. We want to generate our own RECs organically through the projects we invest in. Some of our landfill gas, I believe, there's some project, I think it's landfill gas, that's actually not even in the MISO RTO. It's located in the PJM, which is a separate transmission operator. In PJM, you can register RECs in multiple states. So we actually have some resources that are registered in the state of Maryland. So we're generating RECs in Maryland, which has a higher market for RECs, prices up, we monetize them, sell them, and buy the equivalent in Michigan. So we leverage an arbitrage deal to retain the value of that, retain the environmental attribute of 1,000 kilowatt hours, but be able to monetize that difference in the value in Maryland versus here in Michigan. So a long-winded answer a little bit for your question, but I think I got back to it.
Yeah, I think you could,
Yeah.
you've seen that Geico commercial, haven't you, with all the acronyms?
Yeah, I was
think-
gonna say,
we could,
acronyms are horrible in the energy industry. Casey and I had to pull up a glossary earlier this week, 'cause there's stuff that we were looking at, like, I don't know what that even means.
okay, anybody else have any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to continue with the MPPA recommendation. Don't everybody speak at once.
I'll motion to continue with the recommendation. I'll support.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to informational items.
All right.
Yay.
Scroll through the very long report. All right, performance data. Again, sales continue to trend ahead of previous year. When we get to the budget, we probably will. We're not anticipating reaching budgeted sales. The original budgeted revenues contained in the budget from our current fiscal year, but overall, we do continue to see trends. The only difference this month is in the commercial sales. We did actually see a slight decrease in total kilowatt hour sales. That's not uncommon even in times of growth this time of year where you're in the low load periods. It's not indicative or a long trend by any means. I think you see the average sale went down far enough to drive the overall sales and overall revenue from commercial down slightly. But again, if you look at the current fiscal year to date and previous fiscal year to date, we continue to continue to march down that growth trend that we see. So any questions on sales or usage? Moving on, cost per kilowatt hour, not much to say here, very similar. We'll shed some light into some potential future trends with this later. Cash is actually relatively stable for a very difficult month. Something that I'm pretty happy to see, that we didn't take a bigger dip in cash, but we do need to see some cash growth over the next couple months, and we do anticipate seeing some cash growth over the next couple months. But overall, if you look over the entire fiscal year, it's been a very stable fiscal year. It's been far more consistent this year from a cash flow standpoint than it typically is. Do not know what is attributed to that, to be honest, but it's something that we do watch closely, and Megan gets tired of me asking her about cash. But cash makes the world go round. So no, it's something we pay a lot of attention to. And again, this was a relatively stable month. And when we get to the operating report, you will see that This past month was nothing resembling stable. So moving on, aging analysis, again, no major changes, natural fluctuations, delinquent balances continue to relatively trend downwards. Again, they fluctuate quite a bit, but with that, the only thing I'll continue to highlight is paperless billing and auto pay customers. Once you catch up. Again, this is a relatively new stat that we're going to report on. We may add, I've got some additional stats on registered users for the new portal. We've crossed over the 1,000 customer threshold, so we have over 1,000, or over a third of our customers are using the new customer portal, and it went out in December. So that's a pretty rapid adoption. I'm thrilled with the work the girls in the office are doing. It's something that I want to highlight to the board because they put a lot of effort into it, and to see paperless billing cross over that 500 mark, reoccurring payments have crossed over 800. We've got almost a quarter, almost 25% of our customers are on auto or reoccurring, or over almost 25% of our accounts are on reoccurring or auto pay, and that paperless number is pretty much growth from the ground up. It was before the new customer portal. We didn't have a great, I think I might have been one of the only paperless customers. So this is all new. This is all cost savings. This is all leveraging technology to meet the changing needs of our customers, and they're clearly receptive to it. So I just wanted to stop and highlight that real quick.
So I have a quick question. So, Megan, so in the paperless billing, so somebody wants to see the bill, they call it up on the internet, and then do you, at that point, the informational items, the newsletter that is sent out, does that automatically come up in that, or do they have to go to see those notes? Would they have to go to our website, or they just don't see it anymore?
So I think we talked about this last month.
Yeah, they
don't see it currently.
They don't currently see it, but as a follow-up from last month, Emily started putting it on the website, and we're exploring because when you're on paperless billing, you get an email that says, hey, your bill's ready. It's got some good information there, and we're looking to see if we can embed a link in that would drive you to the website so it's easily accessible, because we don't want customers to have to seek it out, because I think it's something that we find a lot of customers don't care. They open their bill, the paper copies, they open the bill at the front counter and throw everything in the garbage right there, or hand it to the girls and ask them to throw it away. But we do want it to be readily accessible for the customers that do want to. Because there is some good information that goes out in the bills, and we're looking for ways to make sure the customers see that.
So when they, in the paperless billing, do they only see, again, I haven't seen it, whatever, do they only see what, how much information is on there? Just what they owe?
It's exactly the same bill
does
that
it-
you would receive in the mail.
Does it show what they used in energy last year at this time? And
No.
It's
It's literally just your bill that you receive in the mail.
It's a PDF copy of your
Yeah,
bill.
PDF.
If you took your bill and put it through a scanner, that's what you'd see on your computer.
Yep, it's exactly the same. You can see stuff like that through the customer portal.
Yeah, the additional information that's contained in the customer portal is where you get your usage data, and you get that extra, you get the extra information there.
How many hits have you got on that portal, in that area?
Well, we have that's the over 1,000 registered users, but in terms of, there's no you can't separate, you can't really dive into where customers are using it. You can't really tell how many customers
So you don't have a hit to where
Oh,
you
no, I get it, yeah.
utilizing that, or?
Yeah, we don't get that. If I had to guess, at least 90% of the customers that are signed up for the portal don't use that. It's something that I've always pushed because I'm always interested in my usage.
Well, that's my marketing side, that I would want to see where that's at and see. But it would be interesting if you could find out how many people are actually looking at it, because it might surprise you because that might be, if they're getting interested in this, like Perry said, prices are going up, everything else is going up, and they're thinking, okay, how bad was it doesn't seem like it was this bad last year, we were in COVID, you know what I'm saying? So when they're looking at that, then it might give you a good drive to figure out when you're at Expo, what you guys could be putting to the forefront, that might surprise you, and you might say, hey, we seen that you guys were interested in this is what else we have for you.
And I think, and it's something that we always push, because I always push the usage things. Most customers they forget, what was my bill last July? I might have an idea, but I've had probably 100 customers over the years that have called me and said, I've never had a bill this high.
Right.
And you pull up their usage and go, well, this is very on par with June, July, and August for the last 5 years. And they forget, but having that information available. And I think the important thing is, as we see rate pressure through PCA or whatever, that it's available to them, so we can point it to them. But unfortunately, most customers, from my experience, most customers don't dive into it until they have a need. And that's just it's when they get that bill and they go, oh man, I was expecting a $70 bill and I've got a $200 bill. Then it's what drove that. We can help guide them through it and get them that information. And then they become a little more. You leverage that information a little bit more, but it typically doesn't happen until there's an event that sparks it.
Of course, and money changes everything.
And I'm just I think that's where consumers, and again, maybe a lot of people don't care about it, but in our household, I don't look at the electric bill, the gas bill, my wife does. And we have our family, myself and my 3 sisters, own a cottage out at Murray Lake, which is on consumers. And again, constantly my wife's looking at that and going, nobody's been out there all winter and everything. Why is, what do we have on that's causing this energy or whatever? Because again, it shows what your energy was, April, March, February. I mean, and you can look at it and you try to, you try to analyze it. Well, this is this and this is, and it's a graph and it shows whatever, and I'm going, yeah, but you're still only paying you're still only paying $22. I mean, it's not like all of a sudden it's a $200 bill. But again, for some people, that information is relevant. So, for what it's worth.
All right. Any questions on any performance data items? We will roll on. I'll ask Ryan to do the heavy lifting on the outage report.
One outage last month, just out in the area south of town, 36th Street. Affected just a handful of customers. Not really sure what caused it. We looked up and down every pole, walked the right of way, checked everything we could possibly check. It was a blown fuse, but we don't really know why. Maybe the fuse just got old. We're not sure. Couldn't find a definitive answer, but.
Whereabouts on 30? I mean, so again, when you're saying 36th Street, I'm just looking in my mind and going, man, I don't think. So whereabouts? I mean, is it over by Seguin? Is it over by By
East
Pratt
of-
Lake?
East of Pratt Lake.
Okay.
In that area.
That's where we go out, because further west, we don't go all the way out to 36th Street, correct?
We go west on 36th Street off of Pratt Lake, and then we go out on Pratt Lake quite a ways, almost all the way to Cascade, probably
Okay.
a half mile from there. But yeah, it's a rural area out,
Is it on the map?
Yep.
out in the country. Just,
That way down there.
yep.
Alone.
And to only have basically an hour and a half outage on a Saturday.
Yeah, we didn't know if it was a bird, possibly. It was opening day of turkey season. Maybe somebody scared a turkey up and it ran into the lines. We don't know. We're just speculating. We couldn't find any dead animals. We didn't see any damage. So we don't know. This happens sometimes.
So they took that turkey home.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe.
they took the turkey.
So it cooked.
Don't have to tag it if you don't kill it, right?
Yeah, how far can a power line shoot a squirrel? Like how far can one fly off?
Well, I had a first grader today tell me that he watched a squirrel explode on the power.
Yeah.
That was the comment of the day at the first grade trip today, so.
It's probably the same kid that grabbed one of the safety items on the table when we went like this. Those kids were wild banshees today.
They were. My daughter was the leading cause, I think.
It was pretty comical.
He could throw a squirrel then.
Yeah.
Hammer throw.
Yeah, so that was it last month. Only one location. Really good. Really
Thank
good.
you.
Doing great from an outage standpoint. We hope we can keep the trend going. So with that, we're going to roll on to the income statement. But before we get to that, Megan and I have pulled together a little additional information on power supply and what we are. I'm going to stand up. What volatility looks like in a graph form. So the way that we pay for our power supply is we pay for our power supply through weekly invoices. Those weekly invoices are really market balancing. It's your market balancing, everything we get off of the open market, any long sales that we have from our units, and then we have our monthly bills, and those are our costs for our entitlement projects, Campbell, Bell River, Affect, Kalkaska, I'm forgetting one. Landfill gas falls through there. So what you see up here is monthly totals for our monthly invoice. Down here you see our monthly sum totals of our weekly invoices. And you can see quite a big delta between the two. Until this past month. Going back over 5 years, we have never had a month that our weekly totals surpassed our monthly bill. So typically, just to give you an idea, and what happened is, and why our monthly bill did go down is Campbell had its spring outage. So it was out. We were purchasing more power on the open market, but we do it every spring. It's not something new. It wasn't new for MPPA to navigate. But if you go back to last year, probably, or that's 2 years ago, probably here was the spring outage. We saw an increase in our weekly. So it's to be expected. They move together because if you have an entitlement out, you're going to have to go procure more power on the open market, or you're going to enter into bilateral transactions where you secure firm pricing ahead of time. Again, here's the disruption that we saw in the market. That number, it was $1,000 more or something, but we've never come close to hitting $200,000 a month in weekly invoice costs. So when you talk cash reserve policies and conservative approaches, it's to compensate for things like this. And granted, we will start to see some savings in the future, but it's all a timing thing. I know we've talked about it in the past, and I know I've talked to Steve, and Steve's brought it up. We're paying for fuel for our entitlements 2 months behind. So the coal that Bell River and Campbell are burning, we're paying this month for 2 months ago. And we're paying for market balancing power. So we don't have everything, everything doesn't coincide and correlate perfectly. So we do anticipate some smaller monthly bills moving forward because while Campbell was down and Bell River was down for their spring planned outages, they weren't burning fuel. We'll see that savings in a couple months come through. But we've never seen it's not going to compensate for everything from a market balancing standpoint because we're just not going to make up close to $150,000 or so or $200,000 in fuel expenses from our entitlements. But scroll to the next graph. This next graph is just another graphical representation. These are our weekly invoices during the Campbell Spring outages for the last 3 years. This is a total of our weekly invoices. Again, when Campbell's down, we procure more power on the open market, whether it's through bilaterals or in real time or day ahead purchases, or really a combination of all three typically. Again, you can see this is what market volatility is doing. And then that's total, so that's brass tack dollars out the door, and then you look at average. So some weeks, sometimes the spring outage was only, this year was about five weeks. Last year was about 6 weeks. The year before it was 4 weeks. Again, we had a shorter outage than last year and twice the expense in a weekly invoice. So this is just to highlight some of the volatility, and these are all costs that will ultimately flow through the PCA. So we will at some point catch up. So with the PCA, we've also looked at, I have to zoom out just a touch. So I also want to show you how quickly the forecasts are changing. So MPPA every month provides us with a 12-month overview and projection forecast of all of our power supply costs, and then they project them out an additional 5 years. This was the April forecast. This was the May forecast. In that time, natural gas prices went from being projected to trade at $5 an MMBTU to north of $8 an MMBTU. So you've got a 1 month kind of shift, but the green line is going to be our contracted energy. So that number is the same, should be relatively unchanged. There's some fluctuation. There's not as much fluctuation, but coal prices and things can change. That's not a static price, but there's less volatility in that number. The blue number is average forecasted market balancing of the L&P prices. A month ago, they were still trending high, but we weren't seeing huge spikes. It went from, well, you can't really tell because of the graph here, but somewhere in that 55 to 60 range to 72. Market balancing was right at the $60 mark here, market, and it goes to 80 something. So you see the volatility, and we would anticipate continued projections that fluctuate month after month. So one of the big things is the line to pay attention to, and is what's going to drive our PCA, is the orange line, is our total forecasted power supply. And when in our base anticipated power supply built into the PCA is $53.10, so $53.10 a megawatt hour, and we're seeing months where our all-in purchase power expenses are projected to be north of just shy of $90 a megawatt hour. So we're seeing we've not typically seen this fluctuation. And go ahead and scroll to the next one. So this is a 12-month projection of what we anticipate the PCA to do. Currently, the PCA is sitting at 0.0025, so it's sitting at a quarter of a penny. This month, we will implement the new policy that's a monthly change and a monthly update. And we're expecting, this is an percent bill increase for an all-in bill, residential bill at 850 kilowatt hours compared to the quarter of a penny PCA that we're currently at. So we'll immediately see approximately a 2.4% total bill impact increase, and it's going to need to go to about a half a penny, and then it kind of stabilizes out with the lower, the blended mix of 6 months worth of power. But as we look to the summer and some of these really high prices that they're projecting, we're projecting, or the MPPA is projecting almost over a 700% increase in the PCA over the next few months. And ultimately, it's projected to raise bills to the tune of 16% for some customers. To go back to your point earlier, this is something we are watching very closely. We put a lot of time into looking at some of this and evaluating this and trying to make sure that the board's aware of where rates are potentially going. You can also see that the PCA does have that lag. Obviously you would expect our biggest purchase power months in this summer and the highest expenses, because the load is coming up. You're getting normally just higher prices in the summer. That's why we have time of use rates. But a lot of those effects are linger and take a little catch up, because that PCA is based on a 6-month average, and there's a 2-month delay in applying it because we don't have our expenses for fuel for 2 months. So there's a natural 2-month delay in the PCA, and then it kind of averages on for a while and averages off for a while. So the impacts of one really high month you can feel those impacts for multiple months as you get that lag, and then you get it averaging on and averaging off. But as you can see, we're looking at, in October, November is projected to go over 2 cents a kilowatt hour compared to the quarter of a penny right now. So just wanted to share that with you. It sheds a little bit of light into the budget overruns for purchase power. Without seeing the numbers, we're about $300,000 behind budget. Now, some of that will catch up as we get reduced monthly bills for the fuel that's not being burnt during the outages. But just thought it would be important to share a little forward projection with the board. Share what does, we talk a lot about market volatility, but what does that mean for us? And this is all what it means for us.
Charlie, you add up all those numbers, it looks like for the year it's an 85% increase. What does that mean per dollar?
So this is a 1 month increase.
Right, but if you add up all those, at the end of 12 months, you're close to 85% increase. That's 2.4, the next month it's 1.2.
Yeah.
So it's an 85% increase over a 12-month period.
So
what does that mean per dollar?
So right now, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, we ran them all today, but I want to say a standard bill runs about $107 all in for our current PCA. So you can take 16%. If you took, I don't have it with me, but you're looking at, to use nice round numbers, I don't do math like Steve did, that's for sure. We're going to call it about $100 on a standard bill, because I can do the math on $100.
$16.
So that's about a $16 increase.
Right.
But yeah, you look at the cumulative impact.
Yeah.
It's a substantial, and then it's compounded by fuel costs. It's compounded by groceries. It's compounded by every other cost that's going up.
You would deduct the meter fee though, right? Because this is only on the energy component of the bill.
This is all in bill impacts.
Oh, okay.
So this is, you take the customer charge, EWR charge, renewable energy charge, PCA, base kilowatt hour rate. That's a total bill impact. It looks less bad than just a % increase on this, because those go to 700%. I think we did the math here. I think it was 740 something % on just the PCA that's projected. So that's the volatility that we're trying to navigate. And as you can see, 1 month of forward projections can change everything. And it's one of the reasons from a budgeting standpoint for the conservative approach. We look at all these different models. There are some models that we looked at that showed a potential windfall for us if market prices go up because we have some resources that are economically dispatched, like the Kalkaska CT and the affect plants, I think quasi-economically dispatched. But as power prices go up, some of our, like the Kalkaska unit's not typically planning to run all that much because it only runs when they can essentially beat the market price. There are models that show Kalkaska running enough to actually give us more of a long position and over-hedge us at times where the energy is really high and we could catch a windfall. But we're not planning for that, and there's nuances in the modeling that didn't reflect the increases in Kalkaska's operating expenses directly. So there's a lot of volatility, and the details will kind of dictate where we end up, but there's a lot of moving pieces.
So these projections and the projection of what natural gas is costing right now means that when it's going to cost us more to run our units, do you see, with this volatility, do you see us running our units more, less, not as much? I mean, typically, if the price isn't up there, if it's not economical for us, we're not running it. But do you anticipate that the grid's gonna call for us to run more?
That's a teaser for next month, but no, sorry. Go ahead. No, Casey's going to hit on it. I can go ahead and spill the beans. You can give a preamble next month.
So this increase is a result of many factors. The grid in itself just released a report on their 22-23 planning year, and the report is quite, I don't know, alarming is a good way to put it.
It's scary is what it is.
Yeah, there is very little generation. There's been a decrease in generation capacity. There's been an increase in load, and it's not just single zones in the grid. It's the entire north and central grid that we're in.
It's everything in MISO from Arkansas to Canada has a deficiency in capacity.
So if there's deficiency, then
There's more. It's more.
then we're gonna be running more.
It's more. Well, for one, we're limited to X. We're limited. There's parameters on how much MISO can call on us to run. I'll let you.
Yeah, we're expecting to be required to operate more. We're expected to see extreme price changes and fluctuations.
So my next question is jumping into it, because in my world, or what I think is, the more that we run, the better off our ratepayers are, because we're generating revenue that we normally wouldn't be generating. So therefore, if we as a municipality are generating more revenue, then that benefits our ratepayers. Yes, no, is that full of malarkey?
So every month, I will be getting updated fuel costs from Consumers Energy, and that will basically allow me to calculate when we should or should not run based on energy prices. So every month I'm going to have to.
Well, you're gonna have to do some work now, huh?
He stays very busy. We make sure of it.
So every month I have a different fuel cost in my calculation. So I will have to adjust that every single month to figure out when we should or should not run. When we do generate, what we do is we basically will have a surplus of energy for any given hour that we generate. And that surplus of energy gets sold in the real-time market for the real-time hourly value. And there are a lot of factors into that. You know, we are a part of, you know, our coal generation facilities, Kalkaska, landfills, solar, wind. You know, and every single day, every single hour, you know, those facilities are planning to run, but there can be periods when they're in a unplanned outage, forced outage, and that power that we were relying on for that given hour is not there, which has a per megawatt hour cost associated with it, which is going to be far less than the market expense. So, you know, not only are we tracking monthly fuel costs per day, per hour, all of our PPAs, projects that we're associated with, if they're running or not, and then the value of that surplus of energy that we would generate. A lot of variables.
Yeah,
So now
there's another component of that too. So at any given time, we're buying power in the day ahead, or we're buying power in real time. So anytime we run our generators, we also avoid a cost. So if we create a surplus, we can monetize that at the current market value, but we also avoid a cost. So those generators can play a role. They play a role in our hedge strategy, and it kind of sets an artificial cap sometimes on how much we're going to pay. But that also requires market insight. And it costs money to fire them up. It costs money to get them up and running. So we want to run a sustained operation for 4 hours. What we're seeing in market prices is the day ahead market prices, which Casey relies on heavily, will show a steady rise and a steady drop. And then when you get into real time, it'll go to $800 a megawatt hour, down to 110, up to 300, down to 70. And the volatility from hour to hour can make it very challenging for Casey to know, unless he had a crystal ball, he can't know what to expect. We saw some extreme volatility last week, and it was because of, Casey had pointed this out, it was because we had capped on how much energy we could import from the south. So MISO's got their southern section, then there's a little bottleneck through like Arkansas, I think. Well, there's a maximum power flow that can flow through there, and we capped out on that. So as soon as you cap out and you can't bring in cheap power, prices skyrocketed. Well, then there was a response, and it dropped, and we saw these spikes. I think it went to $400 a megawatt hour, $300 a megawatt hour, down to 80 the next hour.
Back up to 200.
Yeah, it's been all over the place. But back to the original question of do we anticipate operating more? Just from a fuel budget standpoint, we're projected to hit just under $6,000 in fuel expense for the turbines. We went ahead and almost tripled that for next year, and we put $15,000 in the budget, anticipating quite a few more, anticipating the additional calls from MISO for grid support, but also anticipating ability through this summer to economically dispatch and help cap our market exposure by producing power here, but we still produce it at $100 to $150 a megawatt hour, which is not necessarily a competitive price. It's not meant to be a competitive price over the long haul. It's a peaking unit, so it's made to carry through small pieces. But we are definitely anticipating operating the turbines more next year in response to this.
Okay, so here's my next question that you probably don't want, but so because we've talked about it before, having to have 2 people to operate those. So do you have somebody in training? Do you have, because currently, I mean, there's you and Tom. Tom's part-time, you're full-time. Again, but if it's called to run more, what does full-time you know, there's 40 hours in the week for you, and all of a sudden, you got your 40 hours in, and so are we training another employee, or are we looking that we need to hire somebody? I mean, so what's the,
Sure.
What's the
I
plan?
don't say-
what's the plan, man?
I will say, it's kind of a team, I'll start, I guess, but it's, Casey, Ryan, and me we're, all three of us are involved. It was something that Casey and I saw as a very real possibility. I love when you ask these questions, because we've been working on this for months, which is great. It's always nice. But I don't know, probably 6 months ago, last fall, maybe.
Yeah, it was November, I think is when we, yeah.
He's got the details. But we all sat down and kind of identified that there's other influences that are driving this as well, some ISO changes. But ultimately, I don't think, we don't have plans right now to hire anybody, but we do have, Casey does the heavy lifting when it comes to operating. Tom is a wealth of information and help, but Casey has the ability to essentially perform the vast majority of the functions. It turns into a safety issue more than anything. So Casey and Ryan have been working together, and as we operate, we're making sure, I think in November, everybody from the line staff went through an orientation, and the goal will be to leverage somebody on Ryan's staff to help provide assistance to Casey and make sure we're operating safely during those operations. But we are actively in training. I don't know if you guys have had any further discussions or identified people, but it comes, we use your word again, we want to be nimble. We don't know when we're going to be called on. We don't know who's going to be available. And the other thing is Casey has to go in and declare a status of our generators. Are they available? Are they operating? Are they available? Are they not available? There's more complicated terms and meanings, but ultimately that status of the generators is driven by Casey's availability. Casey's going to leave for the weekend. We put them in planned outage. They're not available. MISO takes them out of the queue and says, we're not counting on them. But if he's here, they're ready to operate, and we're leaning on the line staff to help support there.
So my next question is there a certain amount of time? So is there a time that we start to lose our capacity credits or anything? So for instance, like, I'm just saying, like, all of a sudden it's every weekend that MISO or whatever says we need you, but we've pulled them out of service every weekend, or certain, whatever. I mean, is there?
Right now, the way the capacity market works is no. Correct. I would say we had them in a planned outage for a year. Just short of a year.
But
Short
on
of
and
a
off
year.
through the remodeling, through the parking lot.
Yeah, we had
construction.
major projects going. We
Yes.
didn't want to, we're safety of operating was potentially compromised, or availability of operating. MISO has proposed a seasonal capacity structure, and at that point, we don't know enough about the capacity structure that they're proposing, but we're planning for more restrictive capacity accreditation, because yes, as the grid relies on what we have, it's called a BTMG, it's behind the meter generation. MISO can't dispatch it. You've got ahead of the meter and behind the meter. If our generation was attached directly to the transmission grid, MISO can essentially at any given time tell us to turn it on, turn it off. They can dispatch the unit. With it being a BTMG, it falls under different rules. It's a little more, they've got a little more limitations on when they can call on it. So we don't currently, short answer is currently no, future most likely.
Okay.
But we're typically not going to be called on by MISO to run during the weekend either.
Why?
Because the loads, it's going to be driven by your loads, and your industrial load typically shuts down, or your major load. So your load typically ramps up Monday through Wednesday, and then you kind of caps, I don't know here, but most other places I've looked
Hump
at.
day.
Huh? Yep, it is. The graph's a hump day right on Wednesday, but it kind of ramps up usually, and every system and every operation's a little bit different, but most likely, we're most likely to be called on to operate by MISO in the summer, during the week, during the afternoon hours.
Exactly. Yep.
So, all right, with that, I'm gonna roll into the income statement. I won't highlight too much. That I kind of answered the biggest mark there, which is the $300,000 budget overage from the purchase power expense. Like I said, I mentioned earlier, sales revenue is probably we're gonna make up a little bit of that, but we're gonna probably fall short, or most likely fall short of those budgeted revenues. But the good thing is we've offset quite a bit of other expenses. Even the distribution expenses are 5.5% under budget, and that includes $70,000 in expenses for mutual aid that's offset by in the service revenue line item. So staff is doing a great job being frugal, being price conscious. In these times, it's very challenging. So the bad news is purchase power is definitely unstable, but that should come in a line. It'll bring back as we have some lower. We actually got a weekly invoice this week that was a credit, which was great. We celebrated slightly, but we're seeing a little bit. We'll see some of that, but everything else, all the controllable factors, we're pretty confident in our conservative approach, conservative spending practices, and trying to make sure we bring the other items in under budget to help offset some of that. And again, the purchase power expenses will be captured over time through the PCA, but it will put rate pressure on the customers, and it will create timing and cash flow challenges. So with that, I'm going to roll on through the income statement to capital projects report. And just go to the summary again. It's projects continue to move along. We did issue from a vehicle replacement fund. It's not reflected here. I guess it really won't ever be reflected here. But we did, as a side note, we did pay the invoice on the new chipper today. I signed the check today. So we'll send that one off and get it paid for. But everything else is, again, the dock addition. I'm pushing Ryan a little bit to try and wrap up the dock addition, and it's definitely not it's somewhat out of his control because he's doing exactly what he needs to do in prioritizing customers waiting. So it's just, we've got a lot of work
I'm sure you do.
which is good. We've got customers waiting for services, and Ryan's doing a great job juggling system improvement needs and customer needs. So, but other than that, we will roll on to the manager's report. We had a very busy month, MPPA related. Again, we hit on quite a bit. The one thing I will stop and highlight is Casey and I participated in the Candle 3 Project Committee meeting. Consumers Energy has issued a settlement IRP. It's made the news. It's been talked about pretty regularly publicly, so I don't think I have to worry about, I won't share too many details because I don't know what is public and what is not, but it does look, from what basing my opinion on newspaper articles, the settlement IRP has a lot of support for it. It has support from the Attorney General and has support from the MPSC staff, and the settlement IRP does include the continued plan to close Campbell in May of 2025. It does also include extending the life of some assets that were scheduled to be decommissioned. So we'll wait and see how that comes out. But I would say that the trend went from potentially not seeing Campbell close in 2023 or 2025 because they had some pretty significant challenges to overcome. It looks like they were able to rework their IRP and it increased the likelihood, but again, nothing has been, there's not been a final determination on any of that. Another
Question?
Yes.
With that?
Yeah.
So, so how big a hit do you anticipate? Because they were talking about, so we're looking at, it's not gonna, we were gonna have 15 years of, our
Debt-free
bond
bond.
debt-free and this and that. So besides closing it, they're also, we're having a bill to decommission it? I mean, how big a bill, I mean, is that 30,000? Is it 150? I mean, is it,
We don't, I want to,
but we're
I don't have
gonna, we're
definitive-
gonna have.
we're gonna have-
Instead of making, we're gonna have an additional expense to decommission that,
yeah,
correct?
right now, we're being invoiced about $10,000 a month-ish for decommissioning. A few project costs, which largely would go to decommissioning expenses, but it's still a little early to project what the total
Okay.
financial impact would be. We participated in a Bell River Project Committee meeting as well. More bearer of bad news today.
No.
Yeah. We are hit pretty hard with cross-state air pollution allowances associated with the Bell River project. And I'll be the first to admit, I do not understand all of the details. It's a very complicated federal law, but ultimately, each pollution-emitting resource is allowed X number of allowances of essentially instantaneous, or I don't know if it's instantaneous, instances of exceeding pollution parameters or opacity parameters in their discharge. We're allotted X number of, or MPPA or Bell River's allotted X number of allowances. 2 years ago or last year, they reevaluated the cross-state air pollution rules and limited the number of allowances out there. At the same time, the markets warranted running coal a lot. So we saw increased production and a decrease of supply, and basic economic rules abide, and the cost of purchasing additional allowances has increased significantly to the tune of 2 years ago, allowances on the open market cost $80, I believe. Now they're projected to cost between $10,000 and $20,000 a piece. MPPA's total allowance bill is projected to go 2 years ago from $10,000 to somewhere between $2 and $3 million, if I remember correctly. I don't necessarily bring the exact numbers, but you can see the impacts on Lowell. It's more bad news from power supply standpoint. So without that, I'll go on to the last piece of bad news.
When
Sorry.
when we're doing that, though, our percentage, it's all done percentage,
it's all
right?
pro-
I mean, so
yeah.
it's not like you're taking 20 different municipalities that have, and it's shared equally, it's
No,
shared
it's-
by your percentage
yeah,
of what you.
It's pro rata, it's
Prorated.
pro rata share based on your total entitlement. So yes, it's only our piece of it. So last month, as Casey alluded to, and we'll give a presentation next month to shed more light on what the impacts of this are, but MISO held its annual planning reserve auction, which is essentially the capacity auction, where if you have a short position, you have to go out to the market and pay market value to ensure that you have secured enough resources to meet your capacity needs. It cleared at the cap, which is cost of new entry. For us, we do have a long position, so we have some additional capacity that we were able to offer up into the PRA, and so we've updated the budget to reflect some additional capacity revenue, which will help offset some of, it'll help offset some of our increased power supply costs, so, but as Casey alluded to, zones, the entire northern, everything from Arkansas to Canada, cleared at Cone, which means every bit of MISO from Arkansas north, basically that whole collective area is short on capacity. And we'll get into the details next month, but it's alarming in terms of what it means to grid stability for us. So, moving on to MMEA, nothing necessarily to report. I did go to Lansing for our state legislative reception, met with Representative Albert. Briefly while I was there, he is going to be, he's actually being term limited out of as our state representative, but is planning to run for Senate, I believe, and we'll get to know a new representative here, and we'll have some political shakeups at the state level. Karub, who is the firm that does our legislative assisting and keeping pace with all legislative topics with MMEA, shared some stats that at a minimum, the House will see half new members. So half of the State House of Representatives will be brand new next year. So it'll be a year to pay attention to the elections. Moving on, we'll move pretty quick. Again, we've got updates on different, various projects. Again, in Ron's safety update, he does mention that today was pole top rescue and bucket truck rescue. So everybody went down and we grilled a lunch out, and I always like to make that a big day because it's one of the, all safety instructions are important, but pole top rescue is one that I always find, pole top and bucket truck rescue is just an extremely important to keeping everybody safe. So again, they're all important, but I want to just highlight that was a good day. So a couple updates that I do owe the board. Exterior renovation.
Quick
Oh,
question.
yes.
Any interesting notes from that site visit? The site visit, the job site visit. He said he had some notes and comments he sent to you. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, just site visit, like job site.
It was
visit.
just a standard job site.
Yeah.
I think that's what he said.
Just, we always talk about them, what was found, and what was discovered, what work they do, and what were they doing really well, just so we always chat about them to make sure that there's anything that needs to be improved. That way everybody is in the know and they improve the next time. It was just minor little things that, there's always something. You're never gonna be perfect, but.
And it's done periodically, just nothing special about, nothing special occurred that said, oh, we need to go do a job site visit.
But yeah, I assume it was just a
routine, hey.
routine one, but
Right.
curious about that notes and suggestions, but they're just little things that. Okay.
So Energy Center, as the board's aware, the exterior drainage issue that we have has been handed over to our legal counsel. Our legal counsel's been working with Pride and Newhoff, and we have made a tentative agreement that will ultimately fix the drainage issue. And Pride and Newhoff, originally their position was they weren't going to help financially with the cost to do the repair, and now they're going to be a party to that expense. And the big thing is, for me, is trying to mitigate the fact that we're going to have a giant patch in the middle of our parking lot, and make sure we have control over the quality of that patch, and we're trying to control and make sure the appropriate standards are applied to the subsurface work and the base work to make sure it's compacted and we don't see any settling over the underneath the patch, and then also what methods are going to be used to patch it and trying to blend the patch into it. But ultimately, I think our legal counsel's done a great job trying to fight for our best interest and control our expenses. Unfortunately, it's not a perfect situation, but it's better than we were at a couple months ago. So, Wine Shack, I will give a very brief update. It does, the council, I believe, will be talking about the Wine Shack next Monday at the council meeting, and I will be attending, but the agreement with the potential developer, it's more complicated than originally anticipated. Next month, I should be able to provide a little clearer path forward, or may get some clarity to the situation on Monday. Mr. Salzwedel, do you have anything at this time you want to add, or just?
Nothing that I can say right now, but yeah.
Yeah, I think they'll be talking about it, and I will provide an update as soon as I can, but, yeah. Other than that, Transformer Fire, our legal counsel has had renewed conversations with the manufacturer of that, and we're going to put together a proposal this week still and deliver some information to the legal counsel this Thursday to continue that conversation, but there has been some progress on that front. Other things, time of use analysis. So this, the development of time of use rates hit a major snag this week. After the whole process being told software is capable, we've had quite a few challenges. Dafron, our billing vendor, reached out this week and essentially admitted that they misrepresented some capabilities, and we're looking at some remedies on that. It's not great news, but we believe that we'll still be able to, it's not a deal killer by any means, it's just a little delay that we need to work through, and need to understand what the expenses associated with that are going to be. So again, it's a more concrete hurdle, and we're a little, they're taking a couple steps back on what they've told us the whole time. So it's a major setback, but we've got Julie and Megan are doing a great job trying to work through that with Dafron and our AMI vendor. Other thing, the diesel generator did sell and sold for $17,005 and ultimately sold for just under the depreciated value left on the books. So we did have to book a small loss in the income statement, but all things considered, it's good to have that gone. And while I think about it, that used to sit at I want to just make the board aware that we have allowed a state of Michigan weights and measures contractor employee park some equipment at the substation. Brian's worked a deal out, so I just bring that up. If you drive by and see something that looks out of place, we know about it. Everything is, it's a program that they use where they look for local places to park equipment. They've had it parked at the DPW for quite a while, and the DPW is, yeah. I was going to say, DPW needed their space more than we needed the space at the substation, so we graciously worked with the state, and we're happy to accommodate. But did just want to bring it up before I forget, because the diesel generator was parked there. So also want to highlight community engagement. We hosted another homeschool group last week. We had an employee's kid in the group. It was great to have. I didn't get to participate in that one, but those school trips are always a blast. And then today I was able to participate. We did our first ever trip to Bushnell, and did about a half-hour, 45-minute presentation with all the classes. Brought 2 classes out at a time, showed them a lot of neat stuff, introduced them to what electricity does for them, introduced electric safety to them, asked them a bunch of fun questions, had a blast with them. It was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it. So that was a new initiative to try and engage the youth at a different little different age group. With that, I want to just highlight, reminder that May 20th is the MPPA stakeholder meeting. That's coming up. Craig and Perry will be joining me, Casey, Ryan, Megan, and Julie. I believe that's everybody. We're going to have a pretty good contingency there. It's over at Fred Meyer Garden, so looking forward to that. Ryan has celebrated his sixth work anniversary, so I want to celebrate that. We appreciate everything Ryan
Time
does.
flies.
And I mean, if you look at outage metrics, they started to improve about when Ryan got here.
Oh,
so.
definitely.
No, Ryan.
Coincidence.
No, Ryan does great work and we're thrilled to have his leadership down there, and he does a great job being a leader there. We're thrilled to have Emily on board. She celebrated her first work anniversary, has made a monumental impact on the office already in a year, so was thrilled about that. Tom celebrated his original work anniversary. I don't know which work anniversary we're supposed to celebrate,
Right.
but when I can type 1989 for an anniversary, that's something to be celebrated. So I want to just celebrate Tom's contributions to the company. And then I do have a couple very small, maybe just one even update. Two. So on May 26th, just want to make the board aware, on May 26th, we are planning to shut the office down for the day and do an all-employee meeting day. It's going to be a combination of open enrollment. We're rolling out a new online employee portal for benefits through BHS that we're going to roll out that day. We do an annual MERS presentation for all employees. And then one of the strategic objectives I set for myself was a communication goal, and how to effectively communicate and make sure we tear down silos between departments and try and get that information sharing. So in the middle of the day, I've asked all the department heads and to give company-wide updates on what's going on. I usually pick on Ryan. I can see him. He's bright today. So, I ask Ryan to just rehash what are some of the major projects that have occurred, recently. What are we currently working on? What are we working on? Just to try and share information. I'm going to use it as a team building day as well, and do a lunch together. And if we can sneak a cornhole tournament in there for fun inside of all the work. I don't know if we'll have that time, but if we can, that'd be great. But instead of shutting things down multiple times and doing 2 hours here and 2 hours there, we had a big need, and and everything, all the timelines kind of coincided. So we're going to just take the day. It falls between due date and when bills go out, so it's by far the slowest time of the month across the board. So we're going to try it and see how it works, and see what kind of value we get from it, and may try to make it an annual thing if it pans out well. If it doesn't, well, we tried. Other than that, I'm also in the process of applying to Rotary, and wanted to just get some very quick board feedback on. I've heard that in the past, Steve's contract was actually amended to say that Lowell Power would compensate, pay for his Rotary membership. I can't find anything. I don't think it's necessary. But before
How much is it?
600, I think.
yeah, I think $600 a year. It doesn't cost a lot.
Yeah.
I'd rather, so if the board gives me verbal cue, I don't think it even needs to be a board
Well,
action.
don't they eat like weird stuff for lunch?
My sister caters that a lot.
So,
Yeah, like bear and.
in the past, I'm just gonna go past, it was important for the board to have the general manager be a part of the community and that type of thing. And I believe it's a cost that the board and Lowell Power should pick up 100%. I mean,
I
I think
agree.
it's important that it gives besides workshops, conferences, meetings, everything, it's an opportunity to meet with the business owners, the movers and shakers of Lowell in Rotary. And so I would endorse Lowell Light and Power. So you're looking at, you want to join?
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
And I've got a
so
sponsor.
I would endorse picking up the tab. Lowell Light and Power picks up the tab for that. It's something that the board, in the past, the board has wanted to see. I think it's still something, at least I hear it from Tina. I see Craig shaking his head, yes. I think it's important to have our general manager there, and if he's a member, he can take an employee to, and occasionally to, Wednesdays, that type of thing. But I think it's important, so I think it's, I would entertain a motion to Lowell Light and Power to pick up the tab for the Rotary membership.
I don't think we necessarily need, because if the board wants to just say it's a Lowell Light and Power expense, I think that's sufficient, because it's within my spending authority, but it's directly related to me. Kind of like my credit card, you sign off on anything I spend on the credit card. I think a verbal, yeah, we're good.
I'm good with it, so, and
Daniel,
the rest
how
of
do
you
you
can
feel?
chime in.
Andy?
Industry involvement, right? I mean,
Yeah.
part of industry,
Definitely.
just
Yeah.
enterprise is the community involvement.
Okay,
All right. Good feedback, appreciate that. Two small other updates. I joined City Council for a budget review meeting. Those meetings have typically occurred on Saturdays, I think, in the past, and this one occurred on a Monday, so I was asked to participate, and I was thrilled to go talk about Lowell Light and Power. And then on Monday, the mayor and Marty Chambers, Councilman Chambers, asked me to come join them on WION over in Ionia. So I went and spent a couple hours with the J&J Morning Show at WION, talking about Lowell Light and Power a little bit. It was a lot of fun. I told them I'd come back anytime. I'll be happy to talk about
They
it.
didn't
They
tease
get
you
it
that
on.
you had a face for radio?
Oh, yes, and I do. That's all right. That's why I looked this way during it. I told them, I said, I got the face for radio. You asked me to be on TV, and I told you probably not.
They capture a recording of it,
I have no clue. It's a good question.
because if they did, I think that would be a neat thing to put up on our Facebook page or,
You don't know what he said. Maybe you should audit it first.
You better listen. All right, and with that, I'll check into it, and I'll check into it, 'cause I'd be curious. I know there was somebody listening, because Lori Chambers texted Marty in the middle of it and said, so I don't remember what it was said during a commercial break, but I didn't speak a ton, but it was great it's always great to have a platform to brag about the stuff we do.
I heard you guys were gonna do it, and then I forgot all about it.
Well, it was kind of a mayor called and said, you want to be on the radio? Sure. I didn't ask any questions. How's that? When? What date and when? What time? And he got there, he said, all right, we're going to Ionia. All right, sounds great. I think I knew we were going to Ionia. That was it. I assumed that there wasn't just a plethora of radio stations based out of Ionia, so. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll cruise through a little bit. We're going to finish up in record time for this many action items. Wanted to just highlight the newspaper article a little bit that Emily did, talk about the impact Emily's had. Emily worked closely with Emily and Julie to get this press release, and I was thrilled with how it came out. The MMEA Currents magazine picked it up, so we were able to get it in a statewide publication, and I think the following, later we actually got picked up on the APPA daily news blast as well for our road cleanup. So I think we're seeing some motion there. Next picture is one of our, like to highlight that we're taking care of the Ryan and the guys and Casey with the school program coming in. Want to make sure the place was nice, and also wanted to take the opportunity while I was there and make sure we clean the floors, and that little machine got ran quite a bit.
So is that a machine that we've had?
Oh, we rented it.
Oh, we rented it?
I was gonna say, where'd that machine come
We
from?
rented it. And they dropped it off
From
a week,
where?
I think.
Yeah.
Where'd you
So,
rent it from?
Casey.
Morrison, out of Grand Rapids.
It's the same place we bought the forklift through,
Okay, yeah.
and the mezzanine.
So when you were doing that, besides the offices, did you, out where the trucks park and stuff, or did you?
Oh, yeah, they did a lot.
5, 6, 10,
It's
12.
pretty- The floors shine over there right now. It's unbelievable. It's as
Well, we'll be
clean as
able to
it's
see
ever
it.
been.
I think we put 9 hours on the machine.
Wow, that's great.
And it fits through doorways, so we thought,
Mhm.
why not take it in here and clean this? Because, it's been muddy all winter, and the guys drop a lot of mud in there, and it does an awesome job.
That's great.
Yeah, taking care of new stuff. Appreciate the board support.
Is it
And-
clean enough for a board meeting?
Oh, yeah, we're darn
Yes,
right.
we'll talk about that.
All right, I was gonna say, we can do it anytime. We're mobile.
We can sit on that floor now.
It's like a Frankenstein floor.
That's what the kids said.
So this is
Yeah,
just,
that's what I figured.
it was good timing. Office staff's been looking at all the bill assistance programs, so this is something that was pulled together. It'll go out with shut-off letters, or door knockers, I don't remember exactly where else. Shut-off letters, yeah, so the customers that are at risk of being shut off are going to be receiving, information on the services that they can leverage. So I thought that was good to go ahead and include, and will be very important to work with our customers as we see continued strains put on pocketbooks.
Do you have a copy of that downstairs? That page right there?
Yeah.
I'm sure we do.
I'd like one.
And then I included Lisa pulled together with our new smart energy program. She's revamping quite a bit of our literature, and wanted to just include a new flyer for the appliance recycling program that she pulled together, and just showing off some of the work that everybody's doing. And then the last one on the information items that I will touch on is, as we mentioned last month, we're going to just start working through policies and including policies in information items. If there's anything, this is a pretty simple policy. We went to the customer account billing administrative policies and started with policy 1. Pretty self-explanatory. If not a whole lot to this one, but did want to put it in front of you all. And if there's anything you'd like to take up at a future meeting, we're happy to incorporate this into a future meeting or revision, but this one I think is just a pretty straightforward policy.
So how,
Steve, they mentioned we can notify by radio, so. now that you got-
WION, here I come.
Nothing on TV though.
We're not paying for TV. But other than that, Mr. Chairman, there's a schedule of meetings, and I'll hand it over to you.
okay. Again, our next regular board meeting will be June 9th, and that is changed, that is a Thursday instead of the first Tuesday after the second Monday.
You got that down. I'm impressed. I gotta think about it every time I say it.
And I would like to have, because I know, Andrew, you had mentioned, because you couldn't attend, I would like to have that meeting at the Energy Center.
Consider it done. Ryan, will you
So-
put that on your calendar and make sure it's
But send reminders to us like the day of, with
I would
the
say-
text saying
yeah.
that, remember, the meeting is at
Okay.
the Energy Center.
I try to text, I will text numerous times. Reminder, it's
Thank you.
Thursday,
Thank you.
and it's at the Energy Center.
I appreciate that.
Board comment.
Charlie, I'm glad you're gonna be there for Monday, just in case, because they will have open topic on the budget, and just in case there's some questions regarding your budget, you'll be there to answer them. And I know we have the new chargers up are people using them? Do you see anything on the meters? I know it's run through the city.
I would say, I've not looked at the bills.
Yeah, I was just kind of
I'm
curious
not
if
sure.
we've seen an uptick since the old ones weren't working, so hopefully there's an uptick.
Well, they were,
There was a complaint, you know.
What's that?
There was a complaint,
Complaint that they were working?
you know, a complaint that we were charged, that.
Oh, they got charged
They
for it.
got charged for, where before when we first started, they were always
Free.
free.
Okay,
Yeah, and I'll share the motive.
Oh.
The idea behind that is those chargers are made to attract people from outside the community. It's why we pitched it to DDA, as we felt like it was an alignment with their mission of supporting the downtown merchants. So it's really made, the goal of those is to put Lowell on the map. Everybody that lives here already knows it's here. You know, the goal is to bring new
Take the
people
prime-
in, so.
Take the prime parking spot, yeah.
Well, the reason I say that because in the last letter I got from the city, it says, hey, come on, let you know they're here, use them. Well, they're not saying there's a charge to it, so
Right.
you as a resident think you're gonna go down there and plug in for free, but it's not.
It's not.
It's not free.
It should show it on your app when you look it up.
It does.
Find the location.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to achieve your pricing.
Yep.
And then I know Mike has made some tweaks to idling time. It does charge, if you plug in and you just take it for a parking spot, and it takes you 20 minutes to charge and you sit there for 6 hours, there's an idling fee as well to try and keep people from, you know, just parking those spots because they have an electric vehicle. So,
That's it.
Great.
Congratulations on 6 years.
Thank you.
Also, it was an honor to be able to work with Marty Chambers on putting together the Lineman Appreciation Day. And I can't wait to do it again next year. Saturday, June 11th, out at Fallisburg Schoolhouse, we're going to be saving the monarch butterflies by planting milkweed. That's going to be led by Liam Lopez Wagner. He was on the front cover of the Ledger just this past week. So, we're going to have a celebrity guest out at the Fallisburg Schoolhouse. He's been on the cover of Scholastic magazine, too, because of his efforts. What else? I'm missing something, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Andrew.
Perry.
Yeah, that's right. We're just going around the table.
Yep. I don't have any comments.
Daniel?
Yeah, congrats to Ryan and Emily. I guess we could throw Tom in there if we have to.
Yeah, if we have.
Twice a
Didn't
week.
even show up, no. You know, all these, you hear all these complexities coming down in the market, volatility and all these things. It's always nice to see everybody on top of it and kind of like exploring all the options and bringing us good information, good recommendations, good research, you know, sussing out things to like an appropriate level. So I'm always happy to see that. Just want to say appreciate that. Hope to keep getting people on paperless.
honestly, it's a great program.
Yeah, yeah.
Tina?
Oh, wait.
What?
Yes.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Calder Plaza, May 22nd, food truck rally.
Yay.
We'll be
May
there.
22nd?
Yeah.
Is that the big
That's on a
GRs?
Sunday.
Is that the
Yeah.
big food truck
Like 30
kickoff?
trucks or something. We'll be there, 1 to 30. Heck yeah. Or so.
Ish.
Yeah.
Cool.
Don't eat at our truck, either at the truck. We got. Yeah.
The end.
Yep, that's all we got.
Okay. Once again, Lowell Power crew and employees, I'll tell you guys, we do have the dream team here. And when, even though that $230,000 is a lot of money for a truck, if Ryan says we gotta have it and he knows how to maintain it, that's how I feel about having him on board. I trust what he says on this, guys. And I appreciate we don't have just the dream team, we have experts. We've got Casey, we've got Ryan, we've got Tom, we got the young lady down at the end of the table there that is quiet as a mouse. I'll tell you what, we do have experts here, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate you sticking with us and coming to Lowell, moving your whole family here. I hope they're adjusting well.
We love it.
Good.
We do. Now that the sun's shining, it's a whole lot easier to love too. We enjoyed our winter, but we're
There
happy
you
to see the
go.
sunshine.
There you go. But I thank you guys for everything that you guys do. So that's what I like to hear more squirrels are dead. I've got a big hatred of squirrels, guys. I'm just telling you. They chew up and they're terrible.
They taste good.
They don't. Thank you for joining Rotary. You're going to join the old fogey men in this town, and that's
It's
gonna be
not
most
just men,
interesting.
there's women.
Are you Rotary? Are
No.
you on Rotary?
No.
Oh, why not?
Because they meet Wednesday at
Noon.
in noon, and it's.
That's when you guys
and-
eat weird stuff.
And it's hard to, if
It's
you
hard to
make,
schedule that.
make that. So,
But, no, thank you.
I was a junior Rotarian in high school. Does that
Of course
count?
you were.
Okay,
Thank you. That's it.
so, staff, does staff have anything that they want to say?
Megan, you're not
Magpie?
personally at the same, is it?
Magpie? No.
Casey? I mean, I always, I know,
No,
but
I appreciate it. No, I think, like Charlie said, I think the energy market is gonna be very, new this coming summer, this year, so that'll, I think,
strap yourself in, buddy.
yeah, that'll make us very active, so.
Lots of conversations going.
Ryan?
Took a few months to shuffle around some transformers, but we finally did energize the 1500 kVA transformer at 2335 West Main for the large grill facility today.
That is awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Start to put some load on it as they get things finished up in there, but it's finally going now, so it's gonna be good.
Been a long time coming on that one, so.
As Craig said, it's an honor to be a part of the lineman's appreciation day and that type of thing. But it becomes, that's the highlight, lineman's appreciation. But it was, as a board member and community member, it's an appreciation for all employees of Lowell Light and Power. So I know a lot of our office staff were there, and Megan was there with her family, and they had raffles and things that included all employees. And I just, again, it's certainly that week was appreciation, lineman's appreciation, but there's a huge appreciation, as Tina said, for all the employees of Lowell Light and Power. The only other thing in this, we'll have our meeting at the Energy Center. The only other thing I would say is a couple things, I guess. So RP3, I want to make sure that we're keeping up with the things that we need to do to qualify to be to continue to be recognized as an RP3. Again, because sometimes all those little things all of a sudden creep up on you, and again, it's a quite a in-depth application to be the RP3. And then the other is, in today's world, it's crazy out there, and as citizens out there and as employees, be kind to one another.
Yeah.
That's it. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So motion.
I'll support.
It's been moved and supported. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.